Evan Brooks never imagined that stopping for a stranger on a frozen mountain road would change everything. The woman was barefoot, wearing a shredded wedding dress, and running like death itself was chasing her. She wasn't just lost. She was fleeing from one of the most powerful men in the world. What Evan didn't know was that pulling over that night would put his daughter in danger, expose a billionaire's dark secrets, and force him to choose between safety and doing what's right. This is their story. Stay until the end and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The road had no mercy. Evan Brooks gripped the steering wheel of his 15-year-old pickup truck as the tires fought for purchase on black ice disguised as asphalt. Snow came down in sheets, the kind that erased the world beyond 10 feet in any direction. His headlights carved twin tunnels through the storm, revealing nothing but more darkness, more white, more of the relentless mountain pass that had no business being open this late in January. "Dad?" The small voice came from the back seat. Evan glanced in the rearview mirror. His 8-year-old daughter, Mia, had pulled the old quilt up to her chin, the one her mother had made years ago, back when their house still smelled like vanilla candles and Sunday pancakes. Now it just smelled like absence. "Go back to sleep, sweetheart," Evan said, softening his voice despite the tension winding through his shoulders. "We'll be home soon." "Are we lost?" "No, just taking the long way." It was a lie, but a gentle one. The truth was that Evan had needed to drive, to put distance between himself and the empty house that still held Sarah's ghost in every corner. 3 years since the cancer took her. 3 years. And some nights the silence still felt like drowning. So he drove. Took Mia on late-night adventures when sleep wouldn't come. The therapist said it was avoidance. Evan called it survival. "Okay," Mia whispered, and her eyes drifted closed again. Evan turned his attention back to the road. The storm was getting worse. He should turn around, head back to... That's when he saw her. At first he thought it was a trick of the light, a deer maybe, or a damaged road sign caught in the wind. But as his truck crawled forward, the headlights illuminated something that made his heart stop. A woman. She was stumbling down the center of the road, barefoot, wearing what looked like... Jesus Christ, Evan breathed. A wedding dress. Not just any wedding dress. This was the kind that cost more than his truck, his house, and probably his entire year's salary combined. White silk and lace, or what remained of it. The hem was shredded, blackened with mud and road grime. The train dragged behind her like a torn sail, and she was barefoot on frozen asphalt, her steps uneven, desperate. Evan's foot hit the brake. The truck skidded slightly before the tires caught. He threw it into park, leaving the engine running and the headlights on. "Stay in the truck, Mia," he said, grabbing his heavy coat from the passenger seat. "Dad?" "Stay in the truck." He pushed open the driver's door. The cold hit him like a physical blow. 15 degrees, maybe less with wind chill. His breath crystallized instantly, and this woman was out here in nothing but a ruined dress. "Hey!" Evan called out, jogging toward her. "Hey, are you okay?" She spun around and Evan stopped. Her face was a mask of pure terror. Her eyes, wide, glassy, rimmed with smudged makeup, locked onto him like he was another threat in a night already full of them. Her dark hair hung in wet tangles around her shoulders. Her lips were turning blue. "Stay away from me," she gasped, backing up. Her voice was raw, like she'd been screaming. Evan raised both hands, palms out. "I'm not going to hurt you. You're going to freeze to death out here. Let me help." "No, no, no." She shook her head violently. "You don't understand. He'll find me. He has people everywhere. You can't." Her knees buckled. Evan lunged forward and caught her before she hit the pavement. She was shaking so hard her whole body vibrated against him. Ice crystals had formed in her hair. "I've got you," Evan said firmly. "I've got you. Come on." She tried to pull away, but there was no strength left in her. Evan wrapped his coat around her shoulders and guided her toward the truck. She moved like someone in a trance, feet bleeding from cuts she probably couldn't even feel anymore. He opened the passenger door and helped her inside. The cab's warmth hit her immediately, and she gasped, curling into herself. Evan cranked the heat to maximum and grabbed the emergency blanket from behind the seat. "Dad?" Mia's voice was frightened. "Who is she?" "I don't know yet, baby, but she needs help." Evan draped the metallic emergency blanket around the woman's shoulders, layering it over his coat. She was shivering so violently that her teeth chattered like castanets. He needed to get her somewhere warm, fast. Hypothermia was no joke. He climbed back into the driver's seat and put the truck in gear. "Where?" The woman's voice was barely a whisper. "Where are you taking me?" "My house. It's about 20 minutes from here. You need—" "No!" Her hand shot out and grabbed his wrist. Her fingers were ice cold, but her grip was surprisingly strong. "No hospitals. No police. Please." Evan glanced at her. In the green glow of the dashboard lights, he could see that her face was bruised along the left cheekbone. Not fresh, the discoloration was a few days old, yellowing at the edges. His jaw tightened. "Who did this to you?" She didn't answer, just stared straight ahead, her breathing shallow and quick. "Okay," Evan said quietly. "No hospitals, no police. But you're coming home with me, and you're going to get warm, and then we're going to figure out what's going on. Deal?" She nodded once, a tiny movement. Evan guided the truck back onto the road, driving carefully through the storm. Mia had gone silent in the back seat, her eyes fixed on the strange woman in the front seat. Evan caught his daughter's gaze in the mirror and gave her what he hoped was a reassuring smile. The silence in the truck was broken only by the heater's fan and the woman's labored breathing. Evan's mind raced. A wedding dress, bruises, terror so raw it was palpable. Someone was hurting her, someone she was running from. "What's your name?" he asked after a few minutes. She hesitated so long he thought she might not answer. Then, "Rowan." "I'm Evan. That's my daughter Mia, in the back." "Hi," Mia said tentatively. Rowan turned slightly, enough to see the little girl bundled in her quilt. Something in Rowan's expression softened. "Hi, sweetie." "Are you a princess?" Mia asked. "You're wearing a princess dress." A sound escaped Rowan, not quite a laugh, not quite a sob. "No, I'm not a princess." "Then why are you wearing a wedding dress?" "Mia," Evan said gently. "Let's give our guests some space, okay?" But Rowan shook her head. "It's okay." She looked at Mia again. "I was supposed to get married tonight, but I changed my mind." "Oh." Mia processed this. "My mom died 3 years ago." Evan winced. Mia had gotten very direct about death since Sarah passed. The therapist said it was normal. Kids processed grief differently. Still, he wished she'd chosen a different moment. But Rowan just nodded slowly. "I'm so sorry. That must be really hard." "It is," Mia said matter-of-factly. "But Dad says she's still with us. In our hearts." "Your dad's right." They drove on. The storm showed no signs of letting up, but at least they were moving. Evan took the next exit, winding down from the mountain pass onto the rural highway that would take them toward Haven Ridge, the small town where he'd lived his entire life, population 3,200, where everyone knew everyone and secrets were hard to keep. Which was going to be a problem if this woman, Rowan, was running from someone. "Rowan," Evan said carefully, "I need to know what I'm getting into here. Is someone going to come looking for you?" Her silence was answer enough. "Is it your—" He struggled for the right word. "The person you were supposed to marry?" "Yes." The word came out broken. "Is he dangerous?" Another long pause. Then, "You have no idea." Evan's grip tightened on the wheel. He glanced at Mia in the mirror. His daughter was watching Rowan with wide, solemn eyes. Everything in Evan's body was screaming at him to be careful, to protect Mia, to not bring trouble home, but he'd already made his choice the moment he stopped the truck. "Then we'll deal with it," he said firmly. "Together." Rowan turned to look at him, and for the first time, something other than terror flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or disbelief that anyone would willingly step into her nightmare. "You don't know who he is," she whispered. "Doesn't matter." "It matters. Grant Lockridge. That's his name. Grant Lockridge." The name hit Evan like a physical blow. He nearly swerved off the road. Grant Lockridge. The Grant Lockridge. Tech billionaire. Founder and CEO of Helix Technologies, the company that had revolutionized cloud computing and artificial intelligence. The man was on magazine covers, interviewed by presidents, courted by world leaders. Forbes estimated his net worth at somewhere north of $40 billion, and this woman had run away from marrying him. Holy shit, Evan breathed. Dad! Mia's scandalized voice came from the back. Language! Sorry, baby. But his mind was reeling. Grant Lockridge. This was so far beyond anything Evan had imagined. A domestic dispute with some local guy was one thing, but a billionaire with unlimited resources, private security, and enough money to make problems disappear? You should take me back, Rowan said flatly. Leave me on the side of the road. Forget you ever saw me. Absolutely not. You don't understand. Grant will find me. He always finds what he's looking for. And when he does, anyone who helped me... Her voice cracked. I can't let you get hurt because of me, especially not your daughter. Evan was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he said, Let me tell you something about Haven Ridge. It's a small town. We look out for each other, and we don't take kindly to people who hurt women. I don't care how many billions Grant Lockridge has. He's not taking you anywhere you don't want to go. You can't protect me from him. Maybe not forever, but I can protect you tonight, and tomorrow we'll figure out the next step. One day at a time. Rowan studied his face in the dim light, searching for something. Trust, maybe. Or proof that he was real, that this wasn't some elaborate trap. Finally, she nodded. One day at a time. The Brooks house sat at the end of a gravel driveway, half a mile from the main road. It was a modest two-story cabin, all wood and stone, with a wraparound porch Sarah had loved. Evan had built most of it himself over the years, adding rooms as Mia grew, fixing things that broke, maintaining the place with his own hands because hiring contractors cost money he didn't have. He pulled the truck into the driveway and killed the engine. The house was dark, except for the porch light he'd left on. Snow had drifted up against the front steps. Home sweet home, Evan said, trying to inject some lightness into his voice. Rowan stared at the house like it was a mirage. It's beautiful. It's old and drafty, and the plumbing makes weird noises, but it's ours. Evan opened his door. Come on, let's get you inside before you lose any toes. He helped Rowan out of the truck, one arm supporting her because her legs weren't quite steady. Mia scrambled out of the back seat, still clutching her quilt, and hurried up the steps to unlock the front door. Inside, the house was cold but not freezing. Evan kept the thermostat low when they were out to save on heating costs. He guided Rowan to the couch in the living room and went to crank up the heat. Mia, can you grab some of Mom's old clothes from the storage boxes in my closet? Find something warm. Okay. Mia scampered upstairs, clearly relieved to have a task. Evan turned back to Rowan, who sat on the couch like she might shatter if she moved. He knelt in front of her and carefully examined her feet. They were cut and bleeding, torn up from running barefoot on frozen pavement. This is going to hurt, he warned, but I need to clean these. She nodded distantly. Evan went to the kitchen and came back with a first aid kit, a bowl of warm water and clean towels. He knelt again and gently placed Rowan's feet in the warm water. She hissed at the contact but didn't pull away. I'm sorry, Evan murmured, working carefully. I know it stings. You're being so kind. Rowan's voice was hollow. Why? Because you need help. You don't even know me. I know enough. Evan looked up at her. I know someone hurt you. I know you were brave enough to run. And I know you deserve better than whatever was waiting for you in that cathedral. Tears spilled down Rowan's cheeks, cutting tracks through the remnants of her makeup. She covered her face with both hands, shoulders shaking. Evan finished cleaning her feet, applied antibiotic ointment, and wrapped them in gauze. Then he sat back on his heels, giving her space to cry. Mia came thundering down the stairs with an armful of clothes, sweats, a thermal shirt, thick socks. I found stuff, she announced, then stopped when she saw Rowan crying. Is she okay? She will be, Evan said. Why don't you take these to the bathroom and let Rowan change? I'll make some hot chocolate. With marshmallows? With marshmallows. Mia beamed and led Rowan toward the downstairs bathroom. Evan went to the kitchen, his hands trembling slightly as he filled a kettle with water. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw 3 missed calls from his brother, Tom, and a flurry of text messages. The most recent message made his blood run cold. Tom. Dude, turn on the news. Grant Lockridge's fiancée is missing. They're saying she vanished from her own wedding. There's a massive search going on. Evan's thumb hovered over the screen. Then he turned off his phone and shoved it back in his pocket. The kettle whistled. He made 3 mugs of hot chocolate, loading them with marshmallows the way Mia liked. When he returned to the living room, Rowan had changed into Sarah's old clothes. They were too big on her, but at least they were warm and dry. She'd washed her face, too. Without the makeup and the elaborate hairstyle, she looked younger, vulnerable. Here, Evan handed her a mug. Drink this. Rowan wrapped her hands around the ceramic, soaking in the warmth. Mia curled up on the other end of the couch, sipping her own hot chocolate and watching Rowan with unguarded curiosity. Can I ask you something? Mia said after a moment. Mia, Evan started. It's okay, Rowan said. What do you want to know? Did your prince turn into a frog? Despite everything, Rowan laughed, a real laugh that seemed to surprise her. Something like that. Yeah. That's good. You left before you had to kiss him. Mia. Evan couldn't help but smile. What? That's what happens in the stories. The princess kisses the frog, and he turns into a prince. But if he's already a prince and he's still a frog, then you shouldn't kiss him. That's just logic, Dad. Rowan reached over and squeezed Mia's hand. You're absolutely right. That's very good logic. They sat in silence for a while. The only sounds, the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the corner and the wind howling outside. Evan studied Rowan's face, the bruise on her cheek, the exhaustion in her eyes, the way she held herself like she was waiting for the next blow. Rowan, he said gently, you don't have to tell me everything tonight, but I need to know enough to keep you safe. And Mia, can you do that? Rowan set down her mug. Her hands were shaking again. The wedding was tonight at St. Margaret's Cathedral in Denver. Grant wanted it televised, cameras, celebrities, the whole spectacle. He loves spectacles, loves being seen as this benevolent genius who's changing the world. But he's not, Evan said quietly. No. Rowan's voice dropped to barely a whisper. He's a monster who's very good at wearing a mask. Behind closed doors, he's controlling, violent. He isolated me from everyone, my friends, my family. Said it was for our protection, that people would try to take advantage of me because of his wealth. But really, he just wanted me dependent on him, trapped. Mia's eyes had gone very wide. Evan reached over and squeezed his daughter's shoulder. Mia, sweetheart, why don't you go upstairs and get ready for bed? I'll come tuck you in soon. For once, Mia didn't argue. She climbed off the couch, gave Rowan one more long look, and headed upstairs. When they were alone, Rowan continued. 2 months ago, Grant hit me for the first time. I'd made a joke at dinner, something harmless, but it embarrassed him in front of his business partners. Afterward, in the car, he backhanded me so hard I saw stars. Then he apologized, bought me a necklace worth more than most people's houses, and told me it would never happen again. But it did, Evan said. It did. It got worse. He started monitoring my phone, my emails, my location, had his security team follow me everywhere. I couldn't breathe without him knowing, and the wedding... She closed her eyes. The wedding was supposed to be the final lock on the cage. Once we were married, I'd have no legal recourse. His lawyers had me sign a prenup that basically made me his property. Anger burned hot in Evan's chest. He'd seen domestic violence cases when he was younger, working construction in Denver before he moved back to Haven Ridge. Seen the patterns, the control, the escalation. It always ended the same way if no one intervened. How did you get away? There was a moment right before the ceremony started. Grant was schmoozing with some senators in another room. His head of security got pulled away by a phone call. And there was this side door, just there, unlocked. I didn't even think. I just ran. In your wedding dress. In my wedding dress. I ran through the cathedral, out into the street. I didn't have my phone, my wallet, nothing. Just the dress and the shoes, and I kicked those off after 2 blocks because I couldn't run in them. I saw a bus and jumped on it, didn't even know where it was going. The driver took pity on me, didn't make me pay. I rode it to the end of the line, somewhere up in the mountains, and then I just walked. I walked until I couldn't walk anymore. And that's when you found me. Evan shook his head in disbelief. You walked for miles in the snow, barefoot, in a wedding dress. You could have died. I know. Rowan met his eyes. But I was willing to risk freezing to death if it meant I didn't have to spend the rest of my life with him. The weight of that statement hung in the air between them. You're safe now, Evan said firmly. I promise you, Rowan. We'll figure this out. You keep saying that, but you don't know what Grant is capable of. He has connections everywhere. Law enforcement, private investigators, politicians. He'll spin this into some story about me having a mental breakdown or being kidnapped. He'll make himself look like the victim. And when he finds me, if he finds you, when he finds me, he'll punish me. And he'll punish anyone who helped me. Evan leaned forward. Then we make sure he doesn't find you. Or if he does, we make sure the world knows the truth about him. You said he cares about his image, right? About being seen as this great philanthropist and visionary. It's all he cares about. Then that's his weakness. Men like him, they can't stand being exposed. We document everything, the bruises, your testimony, anything we can find. We build a case so strong that even with all his money and lawyers, he can't make it go away. You really think that's possible? I don't know, Evan admitted, but I know we have to try. Rowan studied him for a long moment. Then she said, Why are you doing this? Really? Evan thought about Sarah, about how helpless he'd felt watching cancer eat away at the woman he loved, unable to stop it, unable to save her. He thought about all the times since then when he'd felt adrift, purposeless, just going through the motions of living without really being alive. Because someone needs to, he said finally, and because I can. Maybe that's reason enough. Rowan's eyes glistened with fresh tears. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet. We've got a long road ahead. Evan set Rowan up in the guest room, a small space with a twin bed and a window that looked out over the snow-covered pines. It had been Sarah's sewing room once, full of fabric and thread and half-finished quilts. Now it was mostly empty, just a bed and an old dresser. It's not much, Evan apologized. It's perfect, Rowan said, and she meant it. After months of sleeping in Grant's mansion, a cold, sterile place that felt more like a museum than a home, this small, humble room felt like sanctuary. Bathrooms across the hall, there are extra blankets in the closet. If you need anything... Evan. Rowan touched his arm. Thank you. For everything. He nodded. Get some rest. We'll talk more in the morning. After Evan left, Rowan sat on the edge of the bed and looked around the room. The walls were a soft blue, peaceful. There was a watercolor painting of mountains hanging above the dresser. Amateur work, but lovely in its sincerity. Everything about this house felt lived in, loved, real. So different from Grant's world of calculated perfection. Rowan lay down and pulled the blankets up to her chin. Her feet throbbed where they were bandaged, but the pain was almost welcome. Proof that she was still alive, still free, still fighting. Sleep came in fits and starts, broken by nightmares of Grant finding her, dragging her back, locking her away forever. Upstairs, Evan tucked Mia into bed, pulling her favorite quilt up around her shoulders. Dad? Mia's voice was small in the darkness. Is Rowan going to be okay? I hope so, sweetheart. Is the bad man going to find her? Evan hesitated. He'd never lied to Mia, not even when the truth was hard. I don't know, maybe. But we're going to do everything we can to protect her. Good, Mia yawned. I like her. She's nice and sad. Like you were after Mom died. The observation hit Evan like a punch to the gut. Yeah, she's been through a lot. Maybe she can stay with us for a while. Then she won't be so sad. Maybe. Mia's eyes were already drifting closed. Love you, Dad. Love you too, baby. Evan kissed her forehead and left the room, closing the door softly behind him. He stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to the old house settle around him, the creak of wood, the whisper of wind through loose shingles, the steady tick of the clock downstairs. Then he went to his own room, pulled out his phone, and turned it back on. The screen lit up with notifications. Dozens of them. News alerts, text messages, missed calls. Evan opened the news app and started reading. Breaking. Billionaire's bride vanishes on wedding day, search underway for missing heiress. Rowan Hale, Grant Lockridge. offers $5 million reward for information. Evan scrolled through article after article, each one more sensational than the last. Photos of Rowan at charity galas, red carpet events, standing next to Grant with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Photos of Grant himself, tall, classically handsome, with steel gray eyes and the kind of smile that belonged in toothpaste commercials. The coverage was all sympathetic to Grant, of course. Poor billionaire whose bride got cold feet. Some articles speculated about a secret affair, others about a mental health crisis. None of them considered that maybe, just maybe, she'd had a damn good reason to run. Evan's phone buzzed with an incoming call. Tom again. He answered. "Where the hell have you been?" Tom demanded. "I've been calling you for hours." "Out driving, couldn't sleep." "Have you seen the news? This is insane. Grant Lockridge's fiancée just vanished into thin air." "Yeah, I saw." "They're saying she might have been kidnapped or had some kind of breakdown. The whole thing is wild." Evan said nothing. "Evan? You still there?" "Yeah. Listen, Tom, I've got to go. Mia needs something." "At midnight? Talk to you tomorrow." Evan hung up before his brother could ask any more questions. He sat on the edge of his bed, phone in hand, staring at Grant Lockridge's face on the screen. This was the man who'd hurt Rowan. This was the monster wearing a tailored suit and $1 million smile. And Evan had just invited him, or at least his wrath, into his home, into his daughter's life. But as he thought about Rowan's terrified eyes, her torn feet, the bruise on her face, he knew he'd made the right choice. Sometimes doing the right thing meant taking a risk. Sometimes it meant standing between someone vulnerable and the forces that wanted to destroy them. Evan turned off his phone again and lay back on his bed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, he'd figure out the next move. Tomorrow, he'd start building that case, finding those witnesses, gathering that evidence. But tonight, he'd given Rowan Hale something she hadn't had in months, a safe place to sleep. And for now, that would have to be enough. Downstairs, Rowan lay awake in the guest room, listening to the house breathe around her. Wind rattled the windows. The furnace kicked on, sending warm air through the vents. Somewhere above, floorboards creaked as Evan moved around. She thought about Grant, about what he must be doing right now. Raging, probably. Throwing things. Screaming at his security team for their failure. Already spinning the narrative, calling in favors, mobilizing his vast resources to find her and drag her back. Grant Lockridge didn't lose. Ever. He'd built an empire by crushing competition, by outmaneuvering rivals, by never accepting defeat. And Rowan had just dealt him the most public humiliation of his life. He would come for her. There was no question about that. The only question was when, and whether Evan and Mia would be caught in the crossfire. She should leave, Rowan thought. First light, she should slip out and disappear. Head to Canada, maybe, or Mexico. Somewhere Grant's reach couldn't quite extend. But even as she thought it, she knew she wouldn't. She was tired of running, tired of being afraid, tired of letting Grant dictate every moment of her existence. For the first time in months, maybe years, Rowan felt something other than fear. She felt anger. Righteous, burning, cleansing anger. Grant had stolen so much from her. Her freedom, her dignity, her sense of self. He'd isolated her from everyone she loved, convinced her that she was nothing without him, that no one would believe her if she spoke out. But Evan had believed her. A stranger, a single dad with his own grief to carry, had looked at her with compassion instead of judgment, had offered her shelter without asking for anything in return. Maybe, Rowan thought, she wasn't as alone as Grant had made her believe. Maybe there were still good people in the world. Maybe there was still hope. She pulled the blankets tighter, and finally, mercifully, sleep claimed her. Outside, the storm raged on. Snow piled against the windows, covering the world in white. And in that small cabin at the end of a gravel driveway, 3 people slept, each one carrying their own scars, their own fears, their own reasons for needing tomorrow to be better than today. None of them knew what was coming. None of them knew that by morning, Grant Lockridge's people would have traced Rowan's last known location to within 20 miles of Haven Ridge. None of them knew that the quiet, careful life Evan had built for himself and Mia was about to be shattered. But they would find out soon enough. Because men like Grant Lockridge didn't just lose their prized possessions, and they sure as hell didn't lose them without a fight. Dawn broke cold and gray over Haven Ridge, the storm having finally exhausted itself sometime before sunrise. Evan woke to the smell of coffee brewing downstairs, strange since he was usually the first one up. He pulled on a sweatshirt and patted down the stairs in his socks, following the scent to the kitchen. Rowan stood at the counter, still wearing Sarah's old clothes, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She'd found the coffee maker and figured out how to work it. When she heard Evan's footsteps, she turned, startled. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to just help myself. I couldn't sleep, and I thought—" "It's fine," Evan said, waving away her apology. He grabbed 2 mugs from the cabinet. "How are your feet?" "Sore, but better." She poured coffee into both mugs, her hands steadier than they'd been last night. "I changed the bandages. I hope that's okay. I found the first aid kit in the bathroom." "That's what it's there for." Evan added cream to his coffee and leaned against the counter. Morning light filtered through the kitchen window, illuminating the fading bruise on Rowan's cheek. In the harsh light of day, he could see other marks he'd missed last night, fingerprint-shaped bruises on her upper arms, a thin scar along her collarbone. Evidence. All of it evidence. "We should take pictures," Evan said, "of the bruises. Document everything while it's still visible." Rowan's hand went reflexively to her cheek. "He always hit me where it wouldn't show, under clothes where makeup could cover it. He was careful about that." "But not careful enough." Evan set down his mug. "Look, I'm not trying to push you, but if we're going to build a case against him, we need documentation. Photos, written testimony, medical records if you have them. Anything that proves a pattern of abuse." "I don't have medical records. Grant made sure of that. Anytime I got hurt, he'd have his personal physician come to the house. No hospitals, no paper trail. And his doctor was on the payroll. He'd write it up as accidents. Me being clumsy." "What about witnesses, staff, friends, anyone who saw what was happening?" Rowan shook her head slowly. "Grant kept a small staff and paid them extremely well to be discreet. And my friends—" her voice caught. "I don't have friends anymore. Grant isolated me from everyone over the past year. Said people were only interested in me because of his money, that they'd try to use me to get to him. Eventually, I stopped trying to maintain relationships. It was easier than fighting about it." Evan felt that familiar anger kindling in his chest. Classic abuser playbook. Isolate, control, break down any support system until the victim had nowhere to turn. "What about your family?" "My parents died in a car accident when I was 23. No siblings. My aunt raised me after that, but she passed away 2 years ago. That's actually how I met Grant, at a charity fundraiser my aunt used to support. He was the keynote speaker. He seemed so charming, so interested in making the world better. I thought—" She laughed bitterly. "I thought I was lucky that someone like him would notice someone like me." "Someone like you?" "I was nobody. A junior marketing coordinator making $38,000 a year, living in a studio apartment with 2 roommates. And here was Grant Lockridge, brilliant and powerful and rich, telling me I was special, that I was different from all the shallow people in his world. I fell for it completely." "That's not your fault. These guys, they're good at what they do. They know how to make you feel seen, valued. It's all part of the game." Rowan wrapped both hands around her coffee mug, drawing warmth from it. "When did you get so wise about domestic abuse?" "I worked construction in Denver for a few years before moving back here. One of the guys on my crew, his sister was in a bad situation. We tried to help her, but—" Evan paused, the memory still painful. "She went back to him. 3 weeks later, she was in the ICU. She survived, barely. But it taught me that getting out is just the first step. Staying out is the hard part." "And you think I can do it? Stay out?" "I think you already did the hardest thing. You left. Everything else we'll figure out together." Before Rowan could respond, they heard the patter of small feet on the stairs. Mia appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, clutching a stuffed rabbit that had been her constant companion since Sarah died. "Morning, baby," Evan said. "Sleep okay?" "Uh-huh." Mia's eyes went to Rowan. "Are you still here?" "Is that okay?" Rowan asked gently. Mia considered this seriously. "Yes, I like when we have people for breakfast. We don't usually have people." "Well then, how about pancakes?" Evan moved toward the refrigerator. "I make a mean pancake. Oh, with chocolate chips?" Mia's eyes lit up. "Is there any other kind?" While Evan cooked, Rowan and Mia sat at the kitchen table. Mia chattered away, telling Rowan about her school, her teacher, Mrs. Henderson, her best friend, Emma, who had just gotten a puppy. It was such a normal domestic scene, so far removed from the nightmare of the night before, that Rowan felt something loosen in her chest. Evan served up a stack of chocolate chip pancakes, and they ate together, the conversation light and easy. For a brief, precious moment, Rowan let herself pretend this was real, that she was safe, that Grant's reach didn't extend to this small kitchen in this small town. Then Evan's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his expression tightened. "It's my brother. I should take this." He stepped out onto the back porch, closing the door behind him. Through the window, Rowan watched him pace, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand running through his hair in what she was already learning was a gesture of stress. She couldn't hear the words, but she could read his body language well enough. Something was wrong. When Evan came back inside 5 minutes later, his face was grim. "Mia, sweetheart, why don't you go get dressed? We might need to go into town later." "But it's Saturday. Can I wear my princess dress?" "Sure, baby. Whatever you want." After Mia bounded upstairs, Evan sat down heavily at the table. "That was Tom. He's the sheriff's deputy here in Haven Ridge. He says there are federal agents in town asking questions. They've got photos of you. They're showing them around, saying you might be in danger, that there's a manhunt." Rowan's blood went cold. "Already? How is that possible?" "Grant's got resources, and he's spinning this as a kidnapping or a mental health crisis. Tom says the FBI is involved, plus private security that Grant hired. They've tracked you to this area based on—" He paused. "Based on traffic cameras and security footage from that bus you took. They know you got off somewhere in the mountains. They're searching a 20-mile radius. Then I need to leave, now, before they connect me to you." "Where are you going to go?" "I don't know, but I can't stay here. I won't put you and Mia in danger." Evan reached across the table and grabbed her hand. "Listen to me. Running again isn't the answer. You're exhausted, injured, and you have no resources. Grant's people are everywhere out there. You won't make it 10 miles. "So what do you suggest?" "We stay smart. We stay quiet. And we start building our case." Evan pulled out his phone. "I have a friend, Rachel Chen. She's a lawyer in Denver, specializes in domestic violence cases. I worked security at the firm where she used to practice. She's good, Rowan. She's helped a lot of women in situations like yours. Grant will have the best lawyers money can buy. Maybe. But Rachel's got something Grant's lawyers don't. She actually gives a damn about her clients." Evan was already pulling up her contact. "Let me call her, see what she says." Rowan wanted to argue, wanted to grab her things and disappear into the morning before Grant's net closed around her. But Evan was right. She was in no condition to run. And more than that, she was tired of running. Tired of being afraid. Tired of letting Grant dictate every move she made. "Okay," she said quietly. "Call her." Evan stepped out onto the porch again. Through the window, Rowan watched him talk, gesture, his expression intense. She finished her coffee, cold now, and tried to calm the panic rising in her chest. Federal agents, private security, a manhunt. This was exactly what she'd feared. Grant mobilizing his vast resources, spinning the narrative to make himself the victim, and her the unstable, irrational runaway who needed to be found and helped. No one would believe her, not against him, not against all that money and power and carefully cultivated public image, except maybe Evan already did. And maybe that was enough to start with. Evan came back inside, his expression cautiously optimistic. "Rachel wants to meet with you, today, if possible. She's in Denver, about an hour's drive. She says what you're describing is textbook coercive control, and with the physical evidence of abuse, we might have a real case." "Might?" "She was honest with me. Grant's got resources and connections. This won't be easy, but she thinks it's worth fighting, and more importantly, she thinks you can win." Rowan felt tears prick her eyes. She'd spent so long being told she was crazy, paranoid, ungrateful, first by Grant, then by her own doubt-filled inner voice. Hearing someone say she could actually fight back, actually win, felt almost impossible to believe. "When does she want to meet?" 2 o'clock. "But first we need to be smart about this. Tom says the feds are setting up checkpoints on the main roads. They're stopping cars, showing your photo. We can't just drive straight into Denver. Then how? Back roads. I grew up in these mountains. I know every logging trail and fire road between here and the city. It'll take longer, but we can avoid the checkpoints. Evan checked his watch. We should leave soon. I'll drop Mia at my brother's place. His wife loves watching her. Won't your brother ask questions? Probably. But Tom's good people. He'll understand once I explain. He's a deputy sheriff. He's supposed to report this kind of thing. Evan met her eyes steadily. Tom's my brother first, a cop second. He knows I wouldn't be involved in something unless I had a damn good reason. He'll give us time. Rowan wasn't sure she believed that, but she didn't have many options. Okay, let's do it. Mia came downstairs in her princess dress, a pink confection with too much tulle that Sarah had made for her 4th birthday. She twirled proudly. Do I look pretty? Gorgeous, Rowan said, and meant it. They loaded into Evan's truck, Mia chattering excitedly about spending the day with Aunt Jen and her cousins. Evan drove through town, taking side streets, his eyes constantly checking the rearview mirror. Haven Ridge was picturesque in the morning light, a main street lined with brick buildings, a church with a white steeple. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone and time moved a little slower than the rest of the world. But today, Rowan noticed things she might have missed otherwise. 2 black SUVs parked outside the diner. Men in suits that didn't quite fit the small-town aesthetic, showing something, photos probably, to the waitress through the window, a helicopter in the distance, circling low over the mountain pass. They were here. Grant's people. Closing in. Evan noticed too. His jaw tightened, but he kept driving, calm and steady, until they reached a modest house on the edge of town. A woman came out, mid-30s, kind face, curly hair pulled back in a ponytail. Tom's wife, Jen. Uncle Evan! 2 kids came barreling out behind her, grabbing Mia before she'd even climbed out of the truck. Evan leaned out the window. Hey, Jen, thanks for taking her on short notice. No problem. Tom said you had some errands to run. Jen's eyes flicked to Rowan in the passenger seat, curiosity evident but unspoken. Hi. Hi, Rowan managed. We'll be back this evening, Evan said. Mia, you be good for Aunt Jen, okay? I will. Bye, Dad. Bye, Rowan. Mia waved enthusiastically as she was swept up by her cousins and ushered inside. Evan pulled away from the curb, taking a different route out of town. They drove in silence for a while, the mountain roads winding higher into the peaks. Finally, Evan turned onto what looked like barely more than a dirt path. Logging road, he explained. Hasn't been used in years, but it'll get us over the mountain and down to the interstate on the other side. We can pick up the highway to Denver from there. The truck bounced over ruts and rocks, but Evan navigated with the confidence of someone who'd driven these roads 1,000 times. They climbed higher, the trees pressing close on either side, until they broke through the tree line and Rowan could see the valley spread out below. Haven Ridge, just a cluster of buildings in the distance, smoke rising from chimneys. It's beautiful, she said softly. Yeah. Sarah loved it up here. We used to come hiking before Mia was born. Evan's voice was distant, remembering. She made me promise we'd raise our kids in a place like this. Somewhere real, she called it. Not a city where everything's concrete and noise. She sounds like she was special. She was. Cancer's a bastard. It took her piece by piece until there was nothing left but pain and morphine. By the end, she barely knew who I was. He was quiet for a moment. I'm not telling you this to make you feel bad. I'm telling you because I understand what it's like to feel helpless, to watch someone you care about suffer and not be able to stop it. But you couldn't have stopped Sarah's cancer. I could have left Grant sooner. I could have... Don't, Evan said sharply. Don't do that to yourself. You survived. That's what matters. You survived long enough to get out, and now we're going to make sure he never touches you again. They drove on, the truck grinding through snow and mud, until they finally hit pavement on the far side of the mountain. Evan merged onto the highway, blending into the sparse Saturday morning traffic heading toward Denver. Rowan watched the landscape blur past, farmland giving way to suburbs, giving way to the city's sprawl. With each mile, she felt the weight of what she was about to do settling over her. She was going to fight back, officially, with lawyers and documentation and a legal case that would put her directly in Grant's crosshairs. You okay? Evan asked, glancing over at her. terrified. That's normal. You're about to go up against one of the most powerful men in the world. Being scared means you're sane. What if Rachel can't help? What if there's not enough evidence? Then we keep looking until we find it. We talk to every person who ever worked for Grant. We dig through every NDA, every payoff, every secret he's tried to bury. Men like him, they leave trails. We just have to find them. Rowan wished she had his confidence. But then, Evan hadn't spent the last year being systematically broken down, having his reality questioned and his perceptions doubted until he couldn't trust his own judgment. Grant was very good at what he did. They reached Denver just after noon, Evan navigating through downtown traffic to a high-rise office building near the Capitol. Rachel Chen's firm occupied the 14th floor. The lobby was all glass and steel, modern art on the walls, the kind of place that costs serious money to maintain. She must be good, Rowan murmured as they stepped into the elevator. She is, but she also takes a lot of pro bono cases. That's how I know her. She was defending a woman whose ex broke into her house while I was working security at her old firm. I helped get the guy arrested. Rachel got the victim a restraining order and full custody of her kids. The elevator opened onto a reception area. A young man at the desk greeted them with a professional smile. You must be Mr. Brooks. Ms. Chen is expecting you. Conference room B, down the hall on your right. Rachel Chen was not what Rowan expected. She was petite, maybe 5'2" in heels, with sharp eyes behind designer glasses, and a handshake that could crack walnuts. She wore a burgundy blazer over a black dress, her hair cut in a sleek bob that probably cost more than Rowan's entire pre-Grant wardrobe. Evan, good to see you, Rachel said, then turned to Rowan. And you must be Rowan Hale. Please sit. Coffee? Water? Water would be great, Rowan said, her mouth suddenly dry. Rachel poured 3 waters from a pitcher on the credenza, then sat across the conference table from them, pulling out a legal pad and a digital recorder. Before we begin, I need to make something clear. Anything you tell me is protected by attorney-client privilege, assuming you decide to retain me. That means I cannot and will not share your information with anyone, including law enforcement, without your explicit consent. Understood? Understood. Good. Now, I've been following the news coverage of your disappearance. Grant Lockridge has painted quite a picture. Distraught groom, mentally unstable bride, possible foul play. He's very good at controlling the narrative. He's good at controlling everything, Rowan said quietly. Then let's take that power away from him. Rachel hit record on the device. Start from the beginning. How did you meet Grant Lockridge? For the next 2 hours, Rowan told her story. Every detail she could remember, the whirlwind courtship, the gradual isolation, the first time Grant raised his hand to her, the escalating violence and control. Rachel took notes, asking pointed questions, circling back to specific incidents. You mentioned he had a personal physician who documented your injuries as accidents. Do you remember the doctor's name? Dr. Marcus Reeves. He came to the house maybe 5 or 6 times over the past year. Rachel wrote this down. We'll subpoena his records. Even if he documented them as accidents, the pattern will be clear to a judge. What about staff? Anyone who might have witnessed abuse? Grant's head of security, Victor Petrov. He was there the night Grant threw a glass at me and it shattered against the wall. Victor helped clean it up. He saw me bleeding from a cut on my arm. Good. Anyone else? Elena Martinez, the housekeeper. She came in twice a week. I think she suspected something, but Grant paid her very well to keep quiet. There was also Grant's assistant, David Chen. Wait, are you related? Rachel smiled thinly. No, common last name. Tell me about David. He was at the house a lot for meetings. He saw the bruises on my arms once when I was wearing a short-sleeved shirt. He looked like he wanted to say something, but didn't. Rachel nodded, writing faster now. We'll interview all of them. Here's what you need to understand, Rowan. Cases like this against high-profile abusers are difficult but not impossible. We have to be strategic. We need to gather testimony from anyone who witnessed abuse or controlling behavior. We need medical documentation, even if it's been manipulated. We need to establish a pattern. And what about the fact that I ran away from my own wedding? How does that look? Honestly, to most people it looks erratic. Grant's already using it to suggest you had some kind of breakdown. But to a family court judge who's seen this pattern before, It looks like a woman who was desperate enough to risk everything to escape. The fact that you ran barefoot in the snow rather than marry him is actually powerful evidence of your state of mind, that you believed staying was more dangerous than running. Evan leaned forward. What about protective orders? Can we get something in place now? I can file an emergency protection order on Monday. That'll at least give us a legal barrier, though enforcement against someone like Grant is... Rachel trailed off diplomatically. Complicated. Because he's rich, Rowan said flatly. Because he's rich, well-connected, and very skilled at operating within legal gray areas. But here's the thing, men like Grant, their power comes from staying hidden. The abuse happens behind closed doors. The control is subtle. The moment we shine a light on it, the moment we make it public record in court documents, he loses his most valuable asset, plausible deniability. He'll destroy me, my reputation, my credibility. He'll make me look crazy. Rachel's expression hardened. Let him try. I've been doing this for 15 years, Rowan. I've gone up against CEOs, politicians, trust fund sociopaths. They all think they're untouchable until they end up on a witness stand under oath, having to explain their behavior to a judge. Grant Lockridge might be a billionaire, but in a courtroom, he's just another abuser. For the first time since she'd fled the cathedral, Rowan felt something like hope flickering in her chest. So what do we do now? Now, we build the case. I'll start with the protection order. Simultaneously, we'll begin interviewing witnesses, staff, former employees, anyone who might corroborate your story. We'll also request Grant's personnel files, looking for other complaints or incidents that might have been buried, and Rachel paused, her expression serious. We prepare for war, because that's what this will be. Grant won't just roll over, he'll fight dirty. I know. Good. As long as you know what you're signing up for. Rachel slid a retainer agreement across the table. My standard rate is $400 an hour, but I can work something out. I don't have any money, Rowan interrupted. Grant controlled all the finances. I don't even have a credit card that's not in his name. We'll deal with that later. For now, consider this pro bono. Once we get a settlement or judgment, we can discuss payment. Rachel extended her hand. So, Rowan Hale, are you ready to fight? Rowan looked at the hand, then at Evan, who nodded encouragingly. She thought about every time Grant had hit her, humiliated her, made her feel small and worthless. She thought about the cathedral, about walking down that aisle toward a future that looked like a prison sentence. And she thought about Evan finding her on that frozen road, about Mia offering her hot chocolate and kindness, about a small house full of love instead of fear. She took Rachel's hand. I'm ready. They left the office with a plan. Rachel would file the protection order first thing Monday morning. In the meantime, Rowan would write down everything she could remember, dates, incidents, witnesses. They'd meet again Wednesday to go over her statement and start the process of deposing potential witnesses. It was almost 4 o'clock when they walked out of the building into weak afternoon sunlight. Evan checked his phone and frowned. What is it? Rowan asked. Tom's been trying to reach me. 3 missed calls. He dialed his brother, listened, then his face went pale. When? Okay, we'll figure it out. Don't tell them anything. I know, I'll explain everything later. Just give me some time. He hung up. What happened? Grant's security team showed up at Tom's house. They were asking about me, about whether I'd been driving on the mountain pass last night. Someone saw my truck. Rowan felt her heart sink. They're connecting you to me. Looks like it. Tom covered for me, said I was just out driving because I couldn't sleep, but they're not stupid. They'll dig deeper. Then we need to get ahead of this. We need to... Evan's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. He answered, his face carefully neutral. Hello? Even from a foot away, Rowan could hear the voice on the other end. Smooth, cultured, familiar enough to make her blood run cold. Grant. Mr. Brooks, Grant said, his tone pleasant and reasonable, the voice he used for board meetings and television interviews. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Evan's eyes met Rowan's. She shook her head frantically, but he'd already made his choice. She's not a thing, and she doesn't belong to anyone. A pause, then, so you are involved. That makes this simpler. I'm prepared to offer you $1 million cash if you tell me where Rowan is. Right now, no questions asked. I'm not interested in your money. 2 million. No. Mr. Brooks, I don't think you understand the situation. Rowan is mentally unwell. She needs help. Medical supervision. I have her best interests at... Bullshit! Evan's voice was hard. I've seen the bruises. I know what you did to her. The pleasant tone evaporated. You have no idea what you're dealing with. I have resources you can't even imagine. I can destroy your life with a single phone call. Your business, your reputation, your custody of your daughter. I can make it all disappear. Then do it. But you're not getting near Rowan again. I'll find her eventually. I always do. And when I do, I'll remember everyone who helped her, everyone who stood in my way. Grant's voice dropped to something colder, more dangerous. Including your daughter. Evan's hand tightened on the phone until his knuckles went white. If you go anywhere near my daughter, You'll what? You're nobody. A washed-up contractor living in a nothing town with a nothing life. I could buy your entire town and bulldoze it for spite. Don't test me, Mr. Brooks. The line went dead. Evan stood frozen, phone still pressed to his ear, his chest rising and falling with barely controlled rage. Rowan touched his arm. Evan? He threatened Mia. Evan's voice shook. That son of a bitch threatened my daughter. I know. I'm sorry. I should have left last night. I should have... Stop. Evan grabbed her shoulders, not hard but firmly. This isn't your fault. None of this is your fault. Grant's the one making threats. Grant's the one who's going to pay for this. How? You heard him. He can destroy everything you have. Let him try. Evan's jaw was set. I've lost everything before. When Sarah died, I lost the only person who mattered. But I survived. I rebuilt. And I'll be damned if I let some billionaire sociopath intimidate me into betraying someone who needs help. Rowan felt tears streaming down her face. Why are you doing this? You don't even know me. Maybe not, but I know enough. I know you're brave, I know you deserve better, and I know that if I don't help you, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if I could have made a difference. He pulled her into a hug. We're in this together now, all the way. They drove back to Haven Ridge in silence, both processing what had just happened. Grant knew about Evan. He'd somehow traced the connection, probably through traffic cameras or witness statements, or the 1,000 other ways a man with unlimited resources could track someone down. The safe haven Evan had offered was no longer safe. The question now was what to do about it. As they approached Haven Ridge, Evan took a different route, avoiding the main roads. He could see more black SUVs parked around town, more men in suits asking questions. The net was tightening. He picked up Mia from his brother's house, keeping the conversation brief. Tom's eyes were full of questions, but he didn't ask them in front of his wife and kids, just squeezed Evan's shoulder and said, "Be careful." Back at the house, after Mia was in bed, Evan and Rowan sat in the living room with the lights off, watching shadows move across the walls. Outside, they could hear vehicles driving slowly past on the main road. Grant's people, searching, circling. They're going to find me, Rowan said quietly. It's only a matter of time. Then we don't wait for them to find you. We go public first. What do you mean? Evan turned to her. Grant's power comes from controlling the narrative, right? He's spinning this as you being mentally unstable, potentially kidnapped. What if we take that power away? What if we tell your story first? No one will listen. He's Grant Lockridge. I'm nobody. You were nobody. Now you're the woman brave enough to run away from one of the richest men in the world. That's a hell of a story, Rowan, and people love an underdog. Rowan's mind raced. Go public. Tell the media everything. Expose Grant's abuse to the world. It was risky, so risky. Grant would retaliate with everything he had. But Evan was right. Staying hidden, staying quiet, only gave Grant more time to control the narrative. Rachel would have to approve it, Rowan said slowly, and we'd need to be strategic about who we talk to. Someone who'd actually listen, who wouldn't just take Grant's side. I might know someone. An investigative journalist, Catherine Wells. She did a piece on Sarah's illness, about the failures of the healthcare system. She's tough but fair, and she doesn't back down from powerful people. You think she'd be interested? In a story about a tech billionaire who abuses women and buys silence? Yeah, I think she'd be very interested. They sat in the darkness, listening to the house settle. to the vehicles prowling outside like predators circling prey. Tomorrow, they'd call Rachel and Catherine. Tomorrow, they'd start building their offensive strategy. But tonight, they just needed to survive. And as Evan watched Rowan's profile in the shadows, saw the determination replacing the fear in her eyes, he realized something. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was preparing to fight back. And God help Grant Lockridge when she did. Sunday morning arrived with deceptive calm. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows as Evan made scrambled eggs, while Mia sat at the table coloring a picture of a castle. Rowan poured orange juice, moving around the kitchen like she'd been there for years instead of 2 days. To anyone looking in from outside, they might have seemed like an ordinary family enjoying an ordinary weekend breakfast. But the 3 black SUVs parked at intervals along the main road told a different story. Evan had counted them during his early morning walk to the mailbox, 3 that he could see, probably more hidden throughout town. Grant's people weren't even trying to be subtle anymore. They wanted Rowan to know they were there, wanted her to feel the walls closing in. "Dad, can Rowan help me build a fort today?" Mia asked, not looking up from her coloring. Evan glanced at Rowan, who managed to smile despite the tension pulling at her shoulders. "I'd love that, sweetie. But your dad and I have some important phone calls to make first." "Boring adult stuff?" "Very boring adult stuff," Evan confirmed, sliding eggs onto 3 plates. "But after that, we'll build the biggest fort this house has ever seen. Deal?" "Deal!" Mia attacked her breakfast with enthusiasm. After they ate, Evan sent Mia upstairs to play while he and Rowan retreated to his small home office, really just a converted closet with a desk and a filing cabinet. He pulled up Catherine Wells' contact information on his laptop. "You sure about this?" Rowan asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Once we go public, there's no taking it back." "I'm sure. But you need to be sure too. This is your story, Rowan. Your choice." She thought about Grant's phone call yesterday, about the threat he'd made against Mia, about how he'd spent the last year making her feel small and powerless and invisible, about the cathedral and the cameras and the life sentence she'd been walking toward in that white dress. "Call her," Rowan said firmly. Catherine Wells answered on the second ring. Her voice was brisk, professional, with a hint of curiosity that came from 20 years of chasing stories that mattered. "Evan Brooks." "It's been what, 3 years?" "About that." "Listen, Catherine, I have something, a story. But it's sensitive and it's dangerous, and I need to know if you're interested before I say more." There was a pause. Evan could practically hear the journalist's instincts kicking in. "I'm listening." "Grant Lockridge, his missing fiancée. She's not missing, she ran away, and I know where she is because she's sitting right next to me." The silence on the other end stretched long enough that Evan wondered if the call had dropped. Then Catherine said very carefully, "You're serious?" "Dead serious. And she's got a story that's going to blow up everything the media's been reporting. But we need someone who won't just take Grant's word as gospel, someone willing to actually investigate." "Where are you?" "Haven Ridge. My house. Can you get here today?" "I can be there in 90 minutes. But Evan, if you're playing games with me..." "I'm not. This is real, Catherine, and it's important." "Then I'll see you soon." After he hung up, Evan turned to Rowan. "She's coming. Now we call Rachel, make sure we're not stepping in anything legally." Rachel was less enthusiastic about the media angle. "It's risky," she said over speakerphone. "Once Rowan goes public, Grant's lawyers will come at her hard. They'll dig up everything, old boyfriends, job performance reviews, anything they can use to discredit her." "They're going to do that anyway," Rowan said. "At least this way my version gets out first." "That's true. And public pressure can be a powerful tool." "Okay. Here's what you do. Stick to the facts. Don't embellish, don't speculate. Tell your story simply and clearly. Document everything with photos. I know you took pictures of the bruises yesterday. And Rowan? Be prepared. The backlash is going to be brutal." "I know," Rowan said quietly. "But I'm done hiding." They spent the next hour preparing. Evan took more photos of Rowan's injuries, making sure the timestamps were clear. Rowan wrote down key dates and incidents, creating a timeline of the abuse. They organized everything into a folder that Rachel could use for the protection order filing. Mia appeared in the doorway, her stuffed rabbit dangling from one hand. Can we build the fort now? Not yet, baby. We have a visitor coming, a friend of mine. Is she nice? Very nice. She's a writer. She tells stories. Mia's eyes lit up. Like the stories you tell me at bedtime? Sort of, but her stories are about real things that happen to real people. Oh. Mia processed this. Can I meet her? Maybe later. Right now I need you to play upstairs for a bit, okay? After Mia left, Rowan stood at the window watching the black SUVs. What if Grant's people try to stop Catherine from getting here? They don't know she's coming. And even if they did, stopping a journalist from doing her job would be a terrible look. Grant's whole strategy depends on maintaining his public image. He won't risk that. But Evan's hand moved unconsciously to his phone, checking the time. 85 minutes had passed since Catherine's call. She should be close now. A silver sedan pulled into the driveway 20 minutes later. Catherine Wells emerged. A woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun, wearing jeans and a blazer. She carried a leather messenger bag and had the alert, assessing look of someone who'd spent decades extracting truth from unwilling sources. Evan met her at the door. Catherine, thanks for coming. You've got my full attention, Evan. This better be what you say it is. Her eyes moved past him to Rowan, standing nervously in the living room. Recognition flickered across her face. That's her. That's Rowan Hale. In the flesh, Rowan said, her voice steadier than she felt. Catherine stepped inside and Evan closed the door behind her. Through the window, he could see one of the black SUVs had moved closer, as if whoever was inside wanted a better view of who'd just arrived. We're being watched, Catherine observed, following his gaze. Grant's security team. They've been circling since yesterday. Catherine set her bag on the coffee table and pulled out a digital recorder and a notebook. Then let's not waste time. Rowan, I'm going to record this conversation if that's okay with you. I'm also going to ask you some difficult questions, questions that may make you uncomfortable, but I need the full story if I'm going to report this responsibly. Understood? Understood. They sat, Catherine on the armchair, Rowan and Evan on the couch. Catherine hit record and stated the date, time, and location for the record. Then she looked at Rowan with eyes that had seen too much suffering but still held compassion. Tell me why you ran. Rowan took a deep breath and began. She told Catherine everything, the whirlwind romance, the gradual isolation, the first incident of violence, the escalating control. She described Grant's public persona versus his private cruelty, the way he monitored her every move, the physician who documented accidents that weren't accidents, the staff who were paid to look the other way. Catherine took notes furiously, occasionally stopping Rowan to ask for clarification or specific details. You mentioned he threw a glass at you. When was this? November 14th. I remember because it was his birthday party. He'd invited about 50 people, business associates, politicians, tech industry people. I'd made a joke about his golf game during dinner. Everyone laughed. After the guests left, he was furious, said I'd humiliated him. And his head of security was there? Victor Petrov. He came into the room while Grant was screaming at me, saw the broken glass, saw me bleeding. He just cleaned it up and left. Catherine made a note. We'll need to talk to Victor. Anyone else who might corroborate your story? Elena Martinez, the housekeeper. David Chen, his assistant. Dr. Marcus Reeves, the physician. But they all signed NDAs. Grant made sure of that. NDAs don't protect criminal activity. If they witnessed assault, their agreements are void. Catherine looked up from her notes. What about the wedding? Walk me through what happened that night. Rowan described the cathedral, the cameras, the moment of clarity when she realized this was her last chance to escape. I just ran. I didn't think about what I was wearing or where I was going. I just knew I couldn't walk down that aisle. And you ended up here? How? I took a bus up into the mountains, got off at the last stop and started walking. I was going to keep walking until her voice broke, until I couldn't anymore. And then Evan found me. Catherine's eyes shifted to Evan. You just happened to be driving on that road? I couldn't sleep. I take drives sometimes when the house feels too empty. Sarah, my wife, she died 3 years ago. Some nights are harder than others. Evan's hand found Rowan's, squeezed it gently. I saw someone in the middle of the road. barefoot in a wedding dress. I couldn't just drive past. So you brought her home, knowing who she was, knowing what that might mean? I didn't know who she was at first. She told me her name was Rowan. Then she told me who she was running from. Evan met Catherine's gaze steadily. And yeah, I knew it would bring trouble, but some things are more important than playing it safe. Catherine studied them both for a long moment. Then she said, Grant Lockridge called you, didn't he? Yesterday, after his people tracked his truck. Evan's expression hardened. How did you know that? Because that's what men like him do. They try to buy compliance first. When that doesn't work, they threaten. What did he offer you? $2 million to tell him where Rowan was. And the threat? He said he'd destroy my life, my business, my reputation. And he threatened my daughter. Catherine's pen moved across the page. Would you be willing to testify to that? The bribery attempt and the threat? Absolutely. Good. Because that's extortion and witness intimidation, both federal crimes. Catherine turned back to Rowan. I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Is there anything in your past, anything at all, that Grant's lawyers could use against you? Drug use, criminal record, mental health hospitalizations, affairs? Rowan shook her head. Nothing like that. I've had therapy for anxiety, but that was years ago before I met Grant. No criminal record, no drug use beyond the occasional glass of wine. And I've been faithful to him throughout our relationship, even after... She stopped, swallowing hard. Even after it became hell. What about social media? Old posts, photos, anything that could be taken out of context? Grant had me delete most of my social media after we got engaged, said it was for security reasons. I kept my LinkedIn but barely used it. Catherine nodded, making notes. That actually works in your favor. Shows the control he exerted over your public presence. She looked up. Okay, here's what happens next. I'm going to write this story. It'll run online first, probably by tomorrow evening. The print edition will follow on Tuesday. But Rowan, you need to understand, the moment this goes live, you become a public figure. Grant's going to hit back hard. He'll have an army of PR professionals spinning his narrative. He'll probably do a tearful interview, play the concerned fiancé who just wants to know his beloved is safe. Are you ready for that? I don't know if anyone can be ready for that, Rowan said honestly, but I know I can't stay silent anymore. Women need to know who he really is. They need to know what he's capable of. Women? Catherine's eyebrows rose. You think there are others? I don't know for certain, but Grant's 47, I'm 28. We've been together 18 months, and most of that was engagement. What was he doing for the 25 years before that? Men like him don't just suddenly become abusers at 45. There have to be others. Catherine's expression shifted into something Evan recognized, the look of a journalist who just caught the scent of a much bigger story. If there are others, my investigation will find them. That's the kind of pattern that brings down empires. A knock at the door made all three of them freeze. Evan stood slowly, his body tense. Stay here, he murmured to Rowan. He opened the door to find his brother Tom standing on the porch, still in his deputy's uniform, his expression grim. We need to talk, Tom said quietly. Now. Evan stepped outside, pulling the door closed behind him. What's going on? Tom glanced toward the black SUV at the end of the driveway, then back at his brother. The FBI's putting pressure on the department. They want to interview you. They've got witness statements that place your truck on the mountain pass the night Rowan disappeared. They know, Evan. They know you picked her up. So what are you going to do? Arrest me? Don't be stupid. I'm not arresting my own brother, but I can't protect you much longer. The agents are getting impatient. They're talking about obstruction charges, about involving Child Protective Services, about Mia. Tom's voice dropped. You need to end this. Whatever you're doing, whatever your plan is, you need to do it fast. Because Grant Lockridge isn't playing around, and neither is the federal government. We're going public. Today. A journalist is inside right now interviewing Rowan. Tom's eyes widened. You're serious? Evan, that's insane. Grant will bury you. Maybe. But at least the truth will be out there. People will know what he did to her. And you really think people will believe her over him? He's a billionaire philanthropist who's donated hundreds of millions to charity. She's a woman who ran away from her own wedding. The optics are terrible. The optics are only terrible if you don't know the full story. Once people see the bruises, hear about the control, the isolation, the violence, they'll understand. Tom ran a hand over his face. I hope you're right. Because if you're wrong, you're going to lose everything. Your house, your business, maybe even Mia. I'm not wrong about this. I can't be. Tom was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. I shouldn't be doing this. This is evidence in an active investigation, and giving it to you could cost me my badge. He pressed it into Evan's hand. Traffic cam footage from that night. Shows your truck stopping on the mountain pass. Shows you helping someone into the vehicle. Time-stamped, clear as day. Grant's lawyers are going to get access to this eventually. I figured you should have it first. Evan stared at the flash drive. Tom, don't thank me. Just use it wisely. And Evan, be careful. Grant Lockridge has already proven he's willing to threaten a child to get what he wants. There's no telling what else he might do. After Tom left, Evan returned inside. Catherine was showing Rowan something on her phone, archived news articles about Grant's past relationships. Look at this. His last serious girlfriend before you was a woman named Melissa Corrigan, tech executive, brilliant by all accounts. They dated for 2 years, got engaged, then suddenly the engagement was called off. No explanation, no press conference. She just disappeared from public life. Where is she now? Rowan asked. That's the interesting part. I can't find her. She deleted all her social media, quit her job, and dropped off the grid entirely. I've reached out to some mutual contacts, but no one seems to know where she went. Or they're not willing to say, Evan interjected. Catherine nodded slowly. Exactly. Women who've been through trauma, especially abuse by powerful men, often go into hiding. It's self-preservation. She looked at Rowan. I'm going to find Melissa Corrigan, and if there are other women, I'll find them too. But I need time to do that investigation properly. The story I publish tomorrow will focus on your account, your escape, the documented evidence of abuse. Then I'll follow up with a deeper investigation into Grant's pattern of behavior. How long will that take? Rowan asked. Weeks, maybe months. This kind of reporting can't be rushed, but trust me, if there's a pattern here, I will uncover it. They spent the next 2 hours going over every detail, with Catherine asking increasingly specific questions about dates, locations, witnesses. She photographed the bruises on Rowan's arms and face, her cut feet, the yellowing marks that Grant had left as evidence of his control. Finally, Catherine packed up her recorder and notebook. I have what I need. The story will run tomorrow at 6 p.m. I'll send you a link before it goes live so you can prepare. She looked at Rowan seriously. Once this is out there, your life changes forever. You'll be recognized everywhere you go. You'll get hate mail, death threats, marriage proposals from strangers who think they're rescuing you. It's going to be overwhelming. I know, Rowan said, but it's better than living in fear. After Catherine left, Evan showed Rowan the flash drive Tom had given him. They watched the footage together on his laptop, grainy but clear enough. His truck stopping on the snow-covered road. A figure in white stumbling toward the headlights. Evan getting out, wrapping her in his coat, guiding her to safety. Grant's lawyers are going to use this, Rowan said quietly. They'll say you kidnapped me, that I was disoriented and you took advantage. Let them try. We've got Catherine's article, Rachel's legal case, and the truth. That's more than Grant's used to dealing with. That night, after Mia was asleep, Rowan and Evan sat on the porch despite the cold. The black SUVs were still there, dark shapes in the darkness, patient and menacing. Tomorrow, everything changes, Rowan said. Yeah. Are you scared? Evan thought about it. Terrified, but also, I don't know, hopeful? I spent 3 years just existing after Sarah died, going through the motions, this, helping you, fighting Grant, standing up for something that matters. It's the first time I felt alive in years. Rowan reached over and took his hand. Thank you for everything, for stopping that night, for believing me, for putting yourself and Mia at risk when you had no reason to. I had a reason. You needed help. Sometimes that's reason enough. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars appear one by one in the clear winter sky. Somewhere in the distance, a helicopter passed overhead, probably another one of Grant's search teams, still looking, still circling. But tomorrow, Rowan thought, the world would know why she ran. Tomorrow, the carefully constructed image of Grant Lockridge would start to crack. And maybe, just maybe, other women would find the courage to speak their own truths. Inside the house, Evan's phone buzzed with a text from Rachel Chen. Protection order filed. Hearing scheduled for Tuesday at 10 a.m. Be ready. Another text came through seconds later, this one from Catherine. Story going live at 6 p.m. tomorrow. Brace yourself. And finally, a text from an unknown number that made Evan's blood run cold. Tell Rowan to enjoy her last day of freedom. She's coming back to me, one way or another. Grant. Evan deleted the text without showing it to Rowan. She had enough to worry about without Grant's psychological warfare. Tomorrow would bring its own battles. Tonight, they deserved a few hours of peace. But as they went inside and locked the doors, Evan found himself checking the windows, making sure every entrance was secure. He pulled out the old baseball bat he kept in the hall closet, left it leaning against his bedroom door within easy reach, just in case. Because he'd learned something over the past 2 days. Men like Grant Lockridge didn't make idle threats. They made promises. And Grant had promised to get Rowan back. The question wasn't if he'd try. The question was when, and what Evan would do when that moment came. Upstairs in the guest room, Rowan lay awake, listening to the house settle around her. She thought about Catherine's article going live tomorrow, about standing in court on Tuesday, about Rachel's confident assurance that they could build a case strong enough to protect her. She wanted to believe it. God, how she wanted to believe it. But she'd spent 18 months watching Grant manipulate reality to suit his needs, watching him charm and bully and buy his way through every obstacle. The man had toppled competitors, outmaneuvered rival tech giants, convinced world leaders to adopt his vision. What chance did one abused woman and a small-town contractor have against that kind of power? And yet, Evan had stood up to Grant on the phone, had refused $2 million, had taken a threat against his daughter and turned it into resolve instead of fear. And yet, Rachel Chen had looked Grant's resources in the eye and declared herself ready for war. And yet, Catherine Wells had listened to Rowan's story and believed every word, ready to put her own reputation on the line to tell the truth. Maybe they didn't need to match Grant's power. Maybe they just needed to be brave enough to stand against it. Rowan pulled the blankets up to her chin, remembering the weight of the wedding dress, the cold asphalt under her bare feet, the moment she'd chosen possible death over certain imprisonment. She'd survived that night. She'd found Evan, she'd found allies, and tomorrow she'd find her voice. Whatever came after, whatever Grant threw at her, whatever the media made of her story, whatever price she had to pay for her freedom, she'd face it standing up instead of cowering down. Because she was done being Grant Lockridge's victim. It was time to be her own hero. Outside, the black SUVs maintained their vigil. Inside, 3 people tried to sleep, knowing that morning would bring a reckoning none of them could predict, but all of them were ready to face. The story was about to break wide open, and nothing would ever be the same again. Monday morning arrived with a tension that made the air feel thick. Evan was up before dawn, brewing coffee and checking his phone obsessively. Catherine's article would go live at 6 p.m., 12 hours from now. 12 hours until the entire world learned what Grant Lockridge really was. Rowan found him in the kitchen, staring out the window at the pre-dawn darkness. The black SUVs were still there, silent sentinels marking the boundary of her temporary freedom. Couldn't sleep either? She asked. Keep thinking about what happens after the story drops. Grant's not going to take this lying down. No, he'll come at us with everything he has. Rowan poured herself coffee, her hands remarkably steady. Rachel called me last night, after you went to bed. She wanted to prepare me for the court hearing tomorrow. And she said Grant's lawyers filed a counterpetition. They're claiming I'm mentally incompetent, that I need to be placed under psychiatric evaluation for my own protection. Rowan's laugh was bitter. It's exactly what I told you he'd do. Make me look crazy so no one believes me. The bruises aren't crazy. The documentation isn't crazy. We have evidence, Rowan. We have evidence that I got hurt. Grant's lawyers will argue I hurt myself, or that the injuries happened accidentally, or that I'm fabricating the whole thing for attention or money or whatever narrative they think will stick. Evan set down his mug hard enough that coffee sloshed over the rim. So what are you saying? That we should just give up? Let him win? No. I'm saying we need to be realistic about what we're up against. Grant doesn't just have lawyers. He has an entire infrastructure designed to protect his image and destroy his enemies. And now I'm his enemy. You're not his enemy. You're his victim who finally fought back. There's a difference. Before Rowan could respond, footsteps on the stairs announced Mia's arrival. The little girl appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, hair sticking up in all directions. "Why are you guys awake?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. "Grown-up stuff, baby," Evan said, forcing brightness into his voice. "Want some pancakes? Can Rowan make them? She does the chocolate chips better." Rowan felt something crack open in her chest, a warmth she hadn't experienced in so long she'd almost forgotten what it felt like. Being wanted, being included, being part of something that felt like family. "I'd love to make pancakes," she said softly. They spent the morning in careful normalcy. Breakfast, dishes, a game of Uno that Mia won 3 times in a row. But the tension hummed beneath everything, a wire pulled taut and waiting to snap. At noon, Rachel called with an update. The judge granted the emergency protection order. As of right now, Grant Lockridge is legally prohibited from coming within 500 feet of you. That includes contact through third parties, no phone calls, emails, text messages, nothing. "Will he actually follow it?" Rowan asked, Rachel on speakerphone so Evan could hear. "Technically, he has to. Practically, men like Grant find ways around legal barriers. But it gives us ammunition if he violates it. Each violation is a separate charge, and judges don't like it when people ignore their orders." "What about tomorrow's hearing?" "Grant will be there. His lawyers will present their psychiatric evaluation argument. We'll counter with your testimony, the photographic evidence, and Evan's statement about Grant's threatening phone call. The judge will make a preliminary ruling on whether the protection order stands and whether you need evaluation. And if the judge sides with Grant," Rachel's pause was telling, "then we appeal, and we fight harder. But Rowan, you need to be prepared for the possibility that you might be ordered to undergo psychiatric evaluation. If that happens, we request an independent evaluator, someone not connected to Grant or his money." After the call ended, Rowan sat staring at her hands. "He's going to be in the courtroom tomorrow. I'm going to have to see him." "I'll be right there with you," Evan said. "You're not facing him alone. You can't come into the courtroom. You're a witness, not a party to the case." "Then I'll be right outside, and the second you walk out of that room, I'll be there." The hours crawled towards 6 p.m. Catherine sent a link at 5:30 with a brief message. "Here we go. Good luck." Evan opened the article on his laptop. The headline hit like a punch to the gut. "Behind the billion-dollar smile, tech mogul Grant Lockridge accused of systematic abuse by runaway bride." Below it was a photo of Rowan from one of Grant's charity galas. Beautiful, smiling, standing next to him in a designer gown. But if you looked closely, really looked, you could see it in her eyes. The fear, the emptiness, the careful mask of someone who'd learned to hide their truth. The article began, "Rowan Hale didn't vanish on her wedding day. She escaped." The 28-year-old marketing professional, engaged to tech billionaire Grant Lockridge, 47, has come forward with allegations of systematic physical and emotional abuse spanning the 18-month duration of their relationship. In an exclusive interview, Hale described a pattern of violence, coercive control, and isolation that escalated as their January 18th wedding approached. "Grant is brilliant at maintaining his public image," Hale said. "He's charming, generous, beloved by world leaders and celebrities alike. But behind closed doors, he's a different person entirely, a person capable of violence when he feels his control slipping." The article went on to detail specific incidents: the first time Grant hit her, the monitoring of her phone and location, the isolation from friends and family, the personal physician who documented accidents that weren't accidents at all. Catherine had included the photographs of Rowan's bruises, time-stamped and undeniable. She'd also included Evan's account of Grant's phone call, the bribery attempt, the threats, the explicit menace directed at an 8-year-old child. The article quoted Rachel Chen extensively, explaining the legal framework around coercive control and why victims of intimate partner violence often struggle to leave their abusers. It discussed Grant's wealth and power as tools of abuse, noting how financial control and social influence can create invisible prisons as effective as any physical cage. Near the end, Catherine had written, "Perhaps most concerning is the question of whether Rowan Hale is Grant Lockridge's only victim. This reporter has identified at least 3 other women from Lockridge's past whose relationships with him ended abruptly, followed by their withdrawal from public life. Attempts to contact these women for comment have so far been unsuccessful. Grant Lockridge's legal team provided the following statement. Mr. Lockridge is devastated by these false allegations. Ms. Hale is suffering from a mental health crisis, and Mr. Lockridge's only concern is for her safety and well-being. He looks forward to addressing these baseless claims in court and clearing his name." But Rowan Hale isn't backing down. "I know what people will say," she told me, "that I'm lying for money or attention, that I'm mentally unstable." Grant's already spinning those narratives, and he has the resources to make people believe him. But I have something he doesn't, the truth, and I'm not afraid to tell it anymore. The article ended with information about domestic violence resources, and a note that this was the first in a series of investigative reports Catherine would be publishing about Grant Lockridge's pattern of behavior. Evan looked at Rowan, who'd been reading over his shoulder. Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling. "She believed me," Rowan whispered. "Every word. She believed me." "Of course she did. Because it's true." Rowan's phone, the burner phone Rachel had given her, began to buzz. Text messages, dozens of them, from the journalist hotline Catherine had set up, people offering support, sharing their own stories, thanking Rowan for her courage. But there were other messages too. Hateful ones. Calling her a gold digger, a liar, a whore, telling her she deserved whatever Grant had done to her, wishing violence upon her in graphic detail. "Don't read those," Evan said, seeing her face pale. "The trolls always come out first. Give it time. People who matter will see the truth." He was right. Over the next hour, as Catherine's article spread across social media, the response began to shift. Verified accounts, journalists, activists, celebrities started sharing the story with messages of support. Hashtags began trending. Hashtag believe Rowan, #Lockridge abuse, #tech accountability. A women's advocacy group issued a statement praising Rowan's courage. A prominent senator tweeted that the allegations deserved serious investigation. A tech industry watchdog called for Helix Technologies' board to suspend Grant pending review of the claims. The story had caught fire. Evan's phone rang. "Tom, you need to turn on the news, now." Evan switched on the TV. Every major network was covering the story. CNN had a legal analyst discussing the challenges of prosecuting wealthy abusers. MSNBC was interviewing a domestic violence expert. Even Fox News, despite their usual skepticism of abuse allegations, was treating the story seriously, probably because Grant's tech industry connections made him suspect to their audience. And then Grant himself appeared on screen. He was at a press conference outside his Denver office building, flanked by lawyers in expensive suits. He looked haggard, or at least he'd been styled to look that way. His usually perfect hair was slightly disheveled. His tie was loosened. He'd probably spent hours with image consultants perfecting the appearance of a man in anguish. "I want to start by saying that I love Rowan Hale," Grant said, his voice cracking just enough to sound genuine. "I love her deeply, and I'm heartbroken that she's going through this mental health crisis. The allegations she's making, they're not true. They're the product of a troubled mind, and I take responsibility for not recognizing the depth of her struggles sooner." Rowan made a sound like she'd been punched. Grant continued, "I've dedicated my career to making the world a better place through technology. I've donated hundreds of millions to charitable causes. The idea that I would ever harm someone I love, it's incomprehensible to me. But I understand that Rowan needs help, and I'm prepared to provide her with the best psychiatric care available. All I want is for her to be safe and healthy." A reporter shouted a question about the photographic evidence. Grant's head lawyer stepped forward. "Those photographs show minor bruising that could have resulted from any number of accidental causes," the lawyer said smoothly. "Ms. Hale is known to be clumsy. There are numerous witnesses who can attest to that. What we're seeing here is a troubled young woman constructing a false narrative, possibly influenced by opportunistic individuals who saw financial gain in encouraging these allegations. The opportunistic individual's comment was clearly directed at Evan and Rachel. Another reporter asked about the threatening phone call to Evan Brooks. Grant's lawyer didn't miss a beat. Mr. Lockridge was understandably emotional when speaking to someone he believed might know his missing fiance's whereabouts. His comments have been taken out of context and mischaracterized. He never threatened anyone's child. He simply expressed his frustration at being kept from the woman he loves. It was a masterclass in narrative manipulation. Grant looked sympathetic, concerned, victimized by circumstances beyond his control. His lawyers had an answer for everything, each response calculated to cast doubt on Rowan's credibility. Evan turned off the TV. "Don't let him get in your head. That's what he wants." "He's good at this," Rowan said hollowly. "Look at him. He's going to convince everyone I'm crazy." "Not everyone. The people who matter, the judge tomorrow, Rachel, Catherine, all the people already sharing your story, they see through him." But even Evan had to admit Grant's performance was effective. The man had turned a damning expose into a sympathetic portrait of a boyfriend trying to help his mentally ill partner. It was disgusting, it was brilliant, and it was going to make tomorrow's court hearing much harder. That evening, Rachel called an emergency conference call. Her voice was tight with controlled anger. "Okay, Grant's playing the mental health card hard. We need to be ready for his lawyers to push for immediate psychiatric evaluation tomorrow." "Can they do that?" Evan asked. "They can request it. Whether the judge grants it depends on how well we present our case. Rowan, I need you to be rock solid on that stand tomorrow. No emotional outbursts, no matter what his lawyers say. You need to be calm, credible, consistent. Understand?" "I understand." "Good. I'm also calling in a favor. Dr. Sarah Morrison. She's one of the country's leading experts on intimate partner violence and trauma. She's agreed to provide expert testimony about coercive control and why victims stay. Having her there will counter any psychiatric testimony Grant's team brings." "Will it be enough?" Rowan asked. "I don't know, but it's the best shot we have." After the call, Evan made dinner while Rowan helped Mia with a puzzle. The little girl kept glancing at Rowan, her face scrunched in thought. "Rowan?" Mia finally said. "Are you in trouble?" "Sort of, sweetie." "Because of the bad man." Rowan looked to Evan, who nodded slightly. They'd agreed to be honest with Mia, within reason. "Yes. The bad man is trying to make people think I'm a liar, but your dad is helping me prove I'm telling the truth." "Good," Mia said firmly. "Dad's really good at helping people. He helped Mrs. Henderson when her car broke down, and he helped Mr. Paulson fix his fence, and he helped me when I was sad about Mom." She looked at Rowan seriously. "He'll help you too." Later, after Mia was in bed, Evan found Rowan on the porch again despite the cold. She was staring at the black SUVs, which hadn't moved all day. "They're not even hiding anymore," she said. "Grant wants me to know he's watching." "Let him watch. Tomorrow you're going to stand in front of a judge and tell the truth, and no amount of surveillance is going to change that." What if the truth isn't enough? What if Grant's lawyers are better than Rachel? What if the judge believes him instead of me? Evan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "When Sarah was dying, I kept asking the doctors if there was anything more we could do. Better treatments, experimental drugs, anything. And finally, one doctor sat me down and said, 'Sometimes all you can do is fight as hard as you can and hope it's enough.' Hope isn't a plan, but it's not nothing either." Is that supposed to be comforting? Maybe, maybe not, but it's true. We're fighting as hard as we can, Rowan. We've got a good lawyer, solid evidence, and a story that's already reaching millions of people. Some of them will believe Grant, but others will believe you. And each person who believes you, who shares your story, who stands up and says this isn't okay, they make it a little harder for men like Grant to keep getting away with this. Rowan leaned against him, and Evan wrapped an arm around her shoulders. They stood like that for a long time, watching the stars appear in the cold night sky. Inside, Evan's phone buzzed with another message. This one from Catherine. "Found Melissa Corrigan. She's agreed to talk." Story number 2 drops Thursday. Grant Lockridge's carefully constructed world was beginning to crack. The hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. Tuesday morning at the Denver County Courthouse. Rachel had warned them to arrive early. There would be media, protesters both supporting and condemning Rowan, and almost certainly some of Grant's people trying to intimidate them. She hadn't been exaggerating. By 8:30, when Evan's truck pulled into the courthouse parking garage, the scene outside was chaos. News vans lined the street, satellite dishes pointed skyward. Protesters held signs, some reading "Believe Survivors" and "Lockridge Abuser Not Innovator," others declaring "Gold Digger" and "Innocent Until Proven Guilty." Rachel met them at a side entrance, flanked by 2 security guards she'd hired specifically for today. "Don't talk to anyone. Don't react to anything anyone says. Eyes forward, keep moving." They made their way through a service corridor, avoiding the main entrance where the media circus was concentrated. But even here, reporters had found them. Cameras flashed. Questions were shouted. "Rowan, are you lying for money? Mr. Brooks, how much are you being paid to hide her? Rowan, do you regret running away?" Rachel's security guards formed a barrier, pushing through the crowd until they reached a private conference room. Once inside, Rachel locked the door and let out a breath. "Welcome to the circus," she said grimly. "It's going to be like that every time you leave the house until this dies down, which could be months." Rowan was pale but composed. She dressed carefully for court, a simple navy dress, minimal makeup, her hair pulled back. She looked professional, credible, and most importantly, sane. "Grant will try to make eye contact with you in the courtroom," Rachel said. "Don't give him the satisfaction. Look at me. Look at the judge. Look at your hands if you have to, but don't look at him." "What about when I testify?" "Same rules. You're not talking to Grant. You're talking to the judge. Tell your story clearly and calmly. His lawyers will try to rattle you. That's their job. Stay focused on the facts." At 9:45, they made their way to the courtroom. Grant was already there, seated at the defense table with 4 lawyers in impeccable suits. He looked nothing like the haggard man from yesterday's press conference. Today, he was polished, powerful, every inch the tech titan who'd built an empire through brilliance and determination. When Rowan entered, his eyes locked onto her. She felt the weight of his gaze like a physical thing, possessive, angry, promising consequences. She looked away. Judge Martha Hendricks entered precisely at 10, a stern woman in her 60s with gray hair and sharp eyes that suggested she'd seen every trick in the book. Everyone rose. The bailiff called the court to order. "We're here today," Judge Hendricks began, "to determine whether the emergency protection order against Mr. Grant Lockridge should remain in effect, and to address Mr. Lockridge's petition for psychiatric evaluation of Ms. Rowan Hale. Ms. Chen, you filed the protection order. You'll present first." Rachel stood. For the next 20 minutes, she laid out Rowan's case with surgical precision. The timeline of abuse, the photographic evidence, the pattern of isolation and control, Evan's testimony about Grant's threatening phone call. Then she called Rowan to the stand. Rowan's hands shook as she was sworn in, but her voice was steady as she began to speak. She told the judge everything: how she'd met Grant, how charming he'd been at first, how gradually the control had tightened like a noose. She described specific incidents of violence, naming dates and witnesses. She explained why she'd run on her wedding day. "I knew if I married him, I'd never get out," she said. "The prenup his lawyers made me sign. It was designed to leave me with nothing if I tried to leave. No money, no resources, no way to support myself. I'd be completely dependent on him, and he'd already shown me what happened when I displeased him." Grant's lead lawyer, a silver-haired man named Martin Castellano, approached for cross-examination. His smile was warm, almost paternal. "Ms. Hale, you've told us a very compelling story, but I have to ask, do you have any proof that Mr. Lockridge actually struck you? Any witnesses to these alleged assaults?" His head of security saw, let me rephrase, any witnesses who aren't on Mr. Lockridge's payroll and therefore might have reason to lie to protect their jobs? "No, and these photographs of bruises, you claim Mr. Lockridge caused them, but couldn't they have come from any number of sources? You're known to be rather accident-prone, aren't you?" "That's what Grant told people. But I wasn't clumsy. I was being hit." "Do you have medical records documenting these assaults?" Dr. Reeves only wrote down what Grant told him to write down. "So that's a no." Castellano's voice remained friendly, conversational. Ms. Hale, isn't it true that you have a history of anxiety and depression? That you were in therapy for mental health issues before you even met Mr. Lockridge? Rachel stood. Objection. Ms. Hale's prior mental health treatment is irrelevant and protected. It's relevant to her credibility, Your Honor, Castellano countered. We're trying to determine whether her perceptions of Mr. Lockridge's behavior are accurate or distorted by mental illness. Judge Hendricks frowned. I'll allow limited inquiry, but tread carefully, counselor. Castellano turned back to Rowan. You were in therapy, weren't you? For anxiety. After my parents died. That was years ago and has nothing to do with... And isn't it true that you've been under enormous stress lately? Planning a high-profile wedding, adjusting to life with Mr. Lockridge, dealing with media attention. That kind of pressure could cause someone with your history to become confused, to misinterpret normal relationship conflicts as abuse. I'm not confused. Grant hit me. Multiple times. He controlled every aspect of my life. He threatened me. Or perhaps you felt controlled because you were used to living independently and found it difficult to adjust to a partnership with a very successful man who has specific security needs due to his prominence. Rowan's voice rose. He gave me a black eye because I smiled at a waiter. That's not security, that's violence. Do you have any evidence of this black eye? Photographs, medical records? He wouldn't let me leave the house until it healed. Castellano spread his hands in a gesture of sympathy. Your Honor, this is exactly what concerns us. Ms. Hale is making serious allegations but has no credible evidence to support them. What she does have is a history of mental health issues and a demonstrated willingness to flee rather than communicate about relationship problems. We believe she's experiencing a psychiatric crisis and needs professional evaluation for her own protection. Rachel called Dr. Morrison next, who provided expert testimony about why victims don't always have documentation, why they struggle to leave, why Rowan's behavior was entirely consistent with someone experiencing systematic abuse. The psychologist was compelling, authoritative, impossible to dismiss. But then Castellano called his own expert, Dr. Raymond Foster, who testified that Rowan's flight on her wedding day was a clear indication of psychiatric disturbance, and that her allegations had all the hallmarks of delusional thinking combined with attention-seeking behavior. It went back and forth for 3 hours. Rachel presented Evan's testimony about Grant's phone call. Castellano argued that Evan was an unreliable witness with financial incentive to support Rowan's claims. Rachel introduced the traffic camera footage showing Rowan's condition when Evan found her. Castellano suggested she'd staged her own distress. Finally, Judge Hendricks called for a recess. I need time to review the evidence and testimony. We'll reconvene at 4 p.m. for my ruling. The wait was excruciating. Evan, Rowan, and Rachel sat in the conference room, barely speaking. Rachel's expression gave nothing away, but Evan could see the tension in her shoulders. At 4 p.m., they returned to the courtroom. Grant was there again, perfectly composed, radiating confidence. Judge Hendricks entered, and everyone rose. When she sat, the courtroom fell silent. I've reviewed the evidence and testimony presented today, the judge began. This is a difficult case. Ms. Hale has presented photographic evidence of injuries and a consistent narrative of abuse. However, Mr. Lockridge's counsel has raised legitimate questions about the source of those injuries and Ms. Hale's mental state. Rowan's hands clenched in her lap. That said, Judge Hendricks continued, I find Ms. Hale's testimony credible. Her account is detailed, specific, and consistent with known patterns of intimate partner violence. The photographic evidence, while not conclusive on its own, supports her claims. And Mr. Lockridge's reported threatening phone call to Mr. Brooks, if accurate, is deeply concerning. Grant's lawyer started to rise. Judge Hendricks held up a hand. Therefore, I'm ruling as follows. The emergency protection order will remain in effect for a period of 90 days, at which point we'll review it again. During this time, Mr. Lockridge is prohibited from any contact with Ms. Hale, directly or through intermediaries. Relief flooded through Rowan so powerfully she nearly sobbed. However, the judge continued, I am ordering a psychiatric evaluation for Ms. Hale to be conducted by an independent evaluator chosen by the court. This is not because I believe she's lying. It's because the allegations are so serious and the evidence so complex that we need an expert opinion to guide future proceedings. Rachel leaned over to whisper, "That's actually a win. Independent evaluator means Grant can't control the outcome." Judge Hendricks wasn't finished. "I'm also ordering Mr. Lockridge to make available for deposition any current or former employee who may have witnessed incidents described by Ms. Hale. That includes household staff, security personnel, and medical professionals. Failure to comply will result in sanctions." Castellano stood. "Your Honor, many of those individuals are bound by confidentiality agreements, which are void if they're being used to conceal evidence of criminal activity. You have 2 weeks to produce the witnesses, Mr. Castellano. This court stands adjourned." The gavel fell. Outside the courtroom, Evan pulled Rowan into a fierce hug. "You did it. The protection order stands." "For now," Rowan said, but she was smiling through tears. "But Evan, she ordered them to produce witnesses. Elena, Victor, Dr. Reeves. They're all going to have to testify." Rachel was already on her phone. "Catherine needs to hear about this. The witness testimony could break this case wide open." As they made their way out of the courthouse through the media gauntlet, Rowan caught a glimpse of Grant being hustled toward a waiting car by his security team. For just a moment, their eyes met across the chaos. His expression promised retribution. But for the first time since she'd known him, Rowan wasn't afraid. She'd faced him in court. She'd told her truth to a judge, and she'd been believed. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but it was a beginning, and sometimes a beginning was all you needed to keep fighting. The psychiatric evaluation took place 3 days later in a sterile office building in downtown Denver. Dr. Patricia Nguyen was a woman in her early 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put Rowan at ease. Over the course of 6 hours, spread across 2 days, she asked questions that cut to the heart of everything Rowan had experienced. "Tell me about the first time you realized something was wrong," Dr. Nguyen said during their second session. Rowan thought back. "It was subtle at first. Grant would get upset if I didn't text him back immediately. He'd say he was worried about me, that something might have happened. It seemed sweet, protective. But then it escalated. He wanted to know where I was every minute, who I was talking to, what we discussed. When I pushed back, he'd get this look, like I'd betrayed him somehow. And you felt guilty. I felt like I was being unreasonable. Here was this brilliant, successful man who loved me enough to worry about my safety, and I was complaining about him caring too much. He made me feel ungrateful." Dr. Nguyen made notes. Classic coercive control. The abuser frames their controlling behavior as love and protection, making the victim feel guilty for wanting autonomy. What about the physical violence? When did that start? Rowan described each incident in painful detail. Dr. Nguyen listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions. By the end of the second day, Rowan felt wrung out, but also strangely lighter, as if naming the abuse in such clinical detail had somehow diminished its power over her. "Ms. Hale," Dr. Nguyen said as they concluded, "I want to be clear about something. You are not suffering from delusions or psychiatric disturbance. You are suffering from trauma, specifically trauma resulting from sustained intimate partner violence. Your decision to flee your wedding wasn't irrational. It was survival instinct. You recognized danger and you acted to save yourself. Will you tell that to the judge? I'll tell the judge that you show all the classic signs of someone who has experienced systematic abuse, that your account is entirely consistent with known patterns of coercive control and intimate partner violence, and that you are mentally competent to make decisions about your own safety and future." Dr. Nguyen's smile was small but genuine. "Mr. Lockridge's lawyers aren't going to like my report." She was right. When Dr. Nguyen's evaluation was filed with the court 4 days later, Grant's legal team immediately tried to have it thrown out, arguing bias and requesting their own evaluator. Judge Hendricks denied the motion with language so sharp that even Rachel looked impressed. But the real bombshell came on Thursday, exactly as Catherine had promised. Her second article dropped at noon, and within minutes it was trending worldwide. The headline read, "She's not the first. 3 more women come forward with abuse allegations against Grant Lockridge." Catherine had found them. Melissa Corrigan, Grant's ex-fiancée who'd disappeared from public life 5 years ago. Amanda Zhang, a software engineer he'd dated briefly in 2018. And Sarah Bennett, a venture capitalist who'd ended her relationship with Grant in 2020 and promptly moved to London. All three women told similar stories: whirlwind romances, gradual isolation, escalating control, violence that started small and grew worse, NDAs signed under duress, payoffs in exchange for silence. Melissa's story was particularly damning. She'd been engaged to Grant for 8 months when he'd put her in the hospital with broken ribs and a concussion. Grant's lawyers had made the police report disappear, paid off the hospital staff, and given Melissa $5 million to sign an NDA and leave the country for 2 years. "I thought I was the only one," Melissa said in the article. "Grant made me feel like I'd somehow provoked him, like his violence was my fault. When I saw Rowan's story, I realized he'd been doing this for years, using his money and power to abuse women and then buy their silence. I couldn't stay silent anymore." The article included documentation, medical records, police reports that Grant's lawyers thought had been buried, bank statements showing the payoffs, sworn statements from witnesses. Catherine had spent weeks building an airtight case, and it was devastating. By evening, Helix Technologies' stock had dropped 12%. 3 board members had resigned. Major clients were issuing statements about reviewing their relationships with the company. The FBI announced they were opening an investigation into potential criminal activity, including witness tampering and obstruction of justice. Grant's carefully constructed empire was collapsing. Evan and Rowan watched the news coverage together. Mia asleep upstairs, the house finally free of surveillance vehicles. Grant's people had pulled back after the court hearing, perhaps realizing that their presence was only making things worse. "He's done," Evan said quietly. "Even with all his money and lawyers, he can't spin this. 4 women with the same story? Documentation? FBI investigation? He's finished." "Don't underestimate him," Rowan cautioned, but even she couldn't keep the hope out of her voice. Men like Grant always have contingency plans. She was right to be cautious. Grant's response came at a hastily called press conference the next morning, but this time, there was no performance of the concerned fiancé, no sympathy play. Instead, Grant stood rigid behind a podium, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. "These allegations are part of a coordinated attack on me and my company," he said, his voice hard. 4 women with a history of financial problems, all represented by the same lawyer, all telling suspiciously similar stories? "This is extortion, plain and simple, and I will not be extorted." A reporter shouted a question about the medical records. Grant's jaw tightened. "Those records have been taken out of context or fabricated entirely. My legal team is pursuing defamation charges against everyone involved in this witch hunt. That includes Ms. Hale, Ms. Corrigan, the journalist Catherine Wells, and anyone else who has participated in spreading these lies. It was a mistake, and everyone watching knew it." Grant had abandoned his careful media strategy and let his rage show through. He looked exactly like what he was, a powerful man furious at being held accountable. The press conference lasted less than 10 minutes before Grant's lawyers pulled him off stage, but the damage was done. Videos of his angry denial went viral, contrasted with clips of the 4 women telling their stories with quiet dignity. Public opinion, which had been divided, began to shift decisively against him. Rachel called that afternoon with news. 2 of Grant's former employees have reached out to me directly, willing to testify without being deposed. Elena Martinez and David Chen both saw incidents of abuse and are ready to go on record. "Why now?" Rowan asked. "Elena said she has a daughter. After seeing your story, she realized she couldn't stay silent and still look her daughter in the eye. David said he's been carrying guilt for years about not speaking up. Catherine's articles pushed him over the edge." "When will they testify?" "Judge Hendricks has scheduled a full hearing for next month. We'll present all the witness testimony then, along with Dr. Nguyen's evaluation and the evidence from the other 3 women. Rowan, this is building into something much bigger than a protection order. The DA's office is watching this closely. If we can prove a pattern of criminal behavior, Grant could face charges. Real criminal charges. Prison time. Not just a civil protection order or a damaged reputation, but actual consequences for what he'd done. The thought made Rowan dizzy with something that felt dangerously like hope. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Rachel prepared for the hearing with military precision. Catherine published follow-up articles. each one uncovering more of Grant's history of abuse and cover-ups. The FBI's investigation expanded to include potential tax fraud and illegal payoffs to law enforcement officials. Through it all, Evan's house became a strange kind of sanctuary. Rowan helped Mia with homework. She cooked dinner while Evan fixed the leaky faucet he'd been meaning to get to for months. They watched old movies after Mia went to bed, sometimes talking, sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence. One evening, about 3 weeks after the court hearing, Mia asked Rowan to braid her hair before bed. "Like Mom used to do," Mia said, handing Rowan a hairbrush. "Dad tries, but he's not very good at it." "Hey," Evan protested from the doorway. "My braids are functional." "They're lumpy," Mia said matter-of-factly. Rowan laughed and began working through Mia's tangles with gentle fingers. As she braided, Mia chattered about school, about her best friend Emma's birthday party, about the science project she wanted to do about volcanoes, normal kid stuff, the kind of conversation Rowan had thought she'd never have. When the braid was finished, Mia turned and hugged her suddenly, fiercely. "I'm glad you're here," she whispered. "I'm glad Dad found you." Rowan's throat tightened. "Me too, sweetie." After Mia was in bed, Evan found Rowan on the porch, her thinking spot, he'd started calling it. She was wrapped in one of Sarah's old quilts, staring out at the mountain silhouettes against the darkening sky. "You okay?" he asked, settling into the chair beside her. "I've been thinking about what happens after. After the hearing, after Grant faces whatever consequences are coming. Where do I go? What do I do? What do you want to do?" Rowan was quiet for a long moment. "I want to help other women. Women in situations like I was in who think there's no way out. I want to show them that leaving is possible, that fighting back is possible." "That sounds like important work." Rachel mentioned that her firm needs someone to coordinate their domestic violence cases, help clients navigate resources, provide emotional support, liaison between legal and counseling services. She said I'd be perfect for it because I understand what they're going through. "Would you take it? The job?" "I want to, but it's in Denver, and I've been staying here so long, taking up your space, disrupting your life." "Hey," Evan reached over and took her hand. "You haven't been disrupting anything. If anything, having you here has been—" He paused, searching for the right words. "It's been good. For me and for Mia. The house feels less empty, less haunted by what we lost." "But you can't want me here forever." "Why not?" The question hung in the air between them. Rowan turned to look at Evan, really look at him. Somewhere over the past month, he'd become more than just the kind stranger who'd saved her life. He'd become someone she trusted, someone she laughed with, someone whose presence made her feel safe in a way she'd never felt with Grant. "Evan," she said carefully, "I don't want to be another person you're rescuing, another project to fix because it makes you feel useful." "Is that what you think this is?" "Isn't it?" Evan stood, walked to the porch railing, looked out at the darkening landscape. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "When Sarah died, I thought that was it for me. One great love in a lifetime, and mine was over. I'd raise Mia, live my life, and that would be enough. And then you stumbled into my headlights in a torn wedding dress, and everything changed." He turned back to face her. "You're not a project, Rowan. You're not someone I'm fixing. You're smart and brave and funny, and you make Mia laugh, and you make this house feel like a home again. And yeah, maybe the timing is complicated, and maybe we've got a lot to figure out, but I need you to know this isn't about rescue. This is about wanting you here, because here is better with you in it." Rowan stood, the quilt falling from her shoulders. "I'm broken, Evan. What Grant did to me, it's going to take years to work through. I wake up with nightmares. I flinch at loud noises. Sometimes I have panic attacks over nothing. You don't want to sign up for that. You're not broken. You're healing. There's a difference." Evan closed the distance between them. "And I'm not asking you to be perfect or healed or anything other than who you are right now. I'm just asking if maybe when all this is over, you'd consider staying, not because you have nowhere else to go, but because you want to be here." Rowan felt tears sliding down her face. "I want to be here," she whispered. "I've wanted to stay for weeks, but I was afraid to even think it, Because what if I'm just looking for another person to depend on? What if I'm not really healed enough to know what I want? Then we take it slow. We figure it out together. No pressure, no expectations. He smiled slightly. Just see what happens. Rowan reached up and touched his face, and Evan went very still. Thank you, she said softly, for everything, for stopping that night, for believing me, for standing up to Grant, for giving me a place to heal, for... Her voice broke. For seeing me as a person instead of a victim. You've always been a person to me, Rowan. An extraordinary person. She kissed him then, tentatively at first, then with growing certainty. It was nothing like kissing Grant had been. That had always felt like surrender, like loss of self. This felt like coming home. When they pulled apart, Evan was smiling. So you'll stay after everything's settled? I'll stay, if you'll have me. I'll have you. The full hearing took place on a cold Tuesday in late February. The courtroom was packed with reporters, advocates, and curious observers. Grant sat at the defense table flanked by his lawyers, but his usual confidence seemed diminished. The weight of 4 women's testimonies, mounting evidence, and FBI investigation had taken a toll. Rachel called her witnesses methodically. Elena Martinez testified about seeing Grant grab Rowan by the throat, hard enough to leave marks. David Chen described finding Rowan locked in a bedroom, crying, with a split lip that Grant claimed she'd given herself by falling. Dr. Reeves, granted immunity in exchange for his testimony, admitted to falsifying medical records at Grant's direction. Victor Petrov was the star witness. Grant's former head of security had clearly decided that his loyalty to his employer wasn't worth prison time. He described in detail the systems Grant had put in place to monitor Rowan. Cameras in every room, tracking software on her phone, instructions to follow her whenever she left the house. Mr. Lockridge told me directly that Ms. Hale needed to be managed, Victor testified. He said she was too independent, that she needed to understand that her life belonged to him now. When I expressed discomfort with some of the surveillance methods, he reminded me that he paid me very well to follow orders, not to question them. Grant's lawyers tried to discredit each witness, but the cumulative weight of their testimonies was overwhelming. When combined with testimony from Melissa, Amanda, and Sarah about their own experiences, a clear pattern emerged. Grant Lockridge had been systematically abusing women for at least a decade, using his wealth and power to silence them. Judge Hendricks listened to 3 days of testimony before calling a recess to consider her ruling. When court reconvened the following Monday, the courtroom was silent with anticipation. Mr. Lockridge, Judge Hendricks began, looking directly at Grant, I have presided over domestic violence cases for 23 years. I have seen every excuse, every justification, every attempt to minimize or explain away abuse. Your case is remarkable only in the scale of resources you deployed to perpetrate and then conceal your crimes. Grant's face was stone. The protection order against you will remain in effect indefinitely. You are prohibited from any contact with Ms. Hale or any of the other women who have come forward with allegations against you. Furthermore, I am referring this case to the district attorney's office with a strong recommendation for criminal prosecution. The evidence of assault, unlawful imprisonment, stalking, and witness tampering is overwhelming. She paused, letting that sink in. Money does not place anyone above the law, Mr. Lockridge. Power does not grant permission to abuse. You used your considerable resources to hurt vulnerable women and then buy their silence. This court finds your behavior not just reprehensible, but criminal. I hope the justice system ensures you face appropriate consequences. The gavel fell. Grant stood abruptly, his face flushed with rage. This is a farce, he shouted, his composure finally shattering completely. You're all being manipulated. These women are liars and extortionists, and his lawyers grabbed him, forcing him to sit down before he could do more damage. But the outburst had been captured by every camera in the courtroom. By evening, it would be playing on every news network in the world. Grant Lockridge, billionaire genius, losing control and screaming at a judge. Outside the courthouse, Rachel addressed the media with Rowan at her side. The other 3 women had chosen to watch via video feed rather than face the media circus, but Rowan had decided she needed to be there in person. Today's ruling represents a victory not just for Rowan Hale, but for every survivor of intimate partner violence, Rachel said. It sends a clear message that wealth and power do not shield abusers from accountability. We are grateful to Judge Hendricks for her careful consideration of the evidence and her unequivocal ruling. A reporter shouted a question. Rowan, what do you want to say to other women who might be in situations like yours? Rowan stepped forward to the microphone. A month ago, speaking in front of cameras would have terrified her. But she'd faced Grant in court. She'd told her story to the world. There was nothing left to be afraid of. I want to say that leaving is possible, she said clearly. I know it doesn't feel possible when you're trapped in it. I know the fear seems insurmountable, but there are people who will help you. Organizations, lawyers, advocates, people who believe you and will fight for you. You are not alone, and you are not to blame for what was done to you. Her voice strengthened. Grant Lockridge tried to make me believe I was nothing without him, that no one would believe me if I spoke up, that his power was infinite and my voice was worthless. He was wrong. And if you're living with someone who makes you feel that way, I promise you they're wrong too. Your voice matters. Your safety matters. You matter. The press conference ended and they made their way to Rachel's car through a crowd of supporters. Women held signs thanking Rowan for her courage. Advocates from domestic violence organizations offered hugs and words of encouragement. It was overwhelming and beautiful and exactly what Rowan needed to believe that speaking out had been worth it. 2 months later, the district attorney announced criminal charges against Grant Lockridge, 4 counts of felony assault, multiple counts of stalking, witness tampering, and obstruction of justice. Helix Technologies board voted unanimously to remove him as CEO. His assets were frozen pending the outcome of the criminal trial. The mighty had fallen. Catherine won a Pulitzer Prize for investigative journalism for her series of articles exposing Grant's pattern of abuse. She immediately announced she was writing a book, with proceeds going to domestic violence prevention organizations. Melissa, Amanda, and Sarah each filed civil suits against Grant, seeking damages for the abuse they'd endured and the years of silence he'd forced upon them. All 3 cases settled out of court for undisclosed amounts, money that couldn't undo the harm but could at least provide resources for healing. And Rowan started her new job at Rachel's firm, helping other women navigate the impossible journey from victim to survivor. 6 months after the hearing, on a warm August evening, Evan and Rowan sat on the porch watching Mia chase fireflies in the yard. The black SUVs were long gone. The media attention had mostly faded. Life had settled into something that felt almost normal. I heard from the DA today, Rowan said. Grant's trial is scheduled for October. They're confident about conviction given the evidence and witness testimony. How do you feel about that? Rowan thought about it. Satisfied, I think. Not happy. There's nothing happy about any of this. But satisfied that he'll finally face real consequences, that he won't be able to hurt anyone else. You did that. You and the other women. You brought him down. We did it together. I couldn't have done it without you, without Rachel, without Catherine. It took a village to hold him accountable. Mia came running up to the porch, her jar full of captured fireflies. Look, I got 12. Beautiful, Rowan said. But remember, we have to let them go before bedtime. I know, I just wanted to count them first. Mia plopped down on the porch steps. Emma says her mom wants to meet you. She read about you in the newspaper and thinks you're a hero. Rowan laughed. I'm not a hero, sweetie. I just did what I had to do. Dad says that's what heroes are. People who do hard things because they have to. After Mia went inside to get ready for bed, Evan pulled Rowan close. They'd been taking things slow, just as he'd promised. Some nights she still woke with nightmares, and Evan would sit with her until the fear passed. She was in therapy twice a week, working through trauma she was only beginning to understand. It was messy and difficult, and not at all like a fairy tale. But it was real, and it was theirs. I've been thinking, Evan said, about the future. Oh? Mia's getting older. She'll need her own room eventually, not that tiny space upstairs. And if you're staying, which you said you are, you're going to need more than the guest room. What are you saying? I'm saying we should add on to the house. Build a proper master bedroom with an actual closet. Maybe expand Mia's room. Make this place something that works for all of us long term. Rowan turned to look at him. Long term? If you want, I know we're taking it slow, but I also know what I want. And what I want is you here. Not as a temporary guest, but as part of this family, part of building a life together. Evan Brooks, are you asking me to move in with you? Officially? I'm asking if you'd consider making this your home. For real. No more guest room, no more temporary arrangements, just home. Rowan felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears this time. Happy tears. Yes, she said. Yes, I want this to be home. They kissed as the last light faded from the sky, and Mia's voice drifted through the open window, singing off-key to herself as she brushed her teeth. Ordinary sounds of ordinary life in a house that had learned to heal. The criminal trial in October lasted 3 weeks. Rowan testified, as did Melissa, Amanda, and Sarah. The jury deliberated for 2 days before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Grant Lockridge was sentenced to 15 years in prison. He would appeal, of course. Men like Grant always did. But the message had been sent, loud and clear. Money and power could not purchase immunity from justice. The day the verdict was announced, Rowan stood outside the courthouse and spoke to reporters one final time. This isn't just about one man being held accountable, she said. It's about changing the culture that protects abusers. It's about believing survivors when they speak up. It's about creating a world where women don't have to choose between safety and survival. That evening, back at the house in Haven Ridge, they celebrated quietly. Rachel came over with champagne. Catherine joined them via video call from New York, where she was on her book tour. Even Tom and Jen stopped by with Mia's cousins. As the sun set and the children ran shrieking through the yard and the adults talked and laughed on the porch, Rowan felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Not the absence of struggle. She still had hard days, moments when the trauma felt overwhelming, therapy sessions that left her wrung out and exhausted. Healing wasn't linear, her therapist reminded her constantly. But there was peace in knowing she'd fought back. Peace in knowing she'd helped other women find their voices. Peace in building a life that belonged to her, not to someone else's vision of what she should be. Mia came and climbed into her lap, sweaty and grass-stained and grinning. Rowan, will you braid my hair for school tomorrow? The special braid like you did for the spring concert? Of course, sweetheart. And will you help me with my book report? It's about brave women in history, and I want to write about you. Rowan's throat tightened. I'm not sure I belong in a book report about historical figures. Why not? You did something brave. You changed things. That's what the assignment says. Write about a woman who made a difference. Then I'd be honored to help you with your report. After Mia scampered off to rejoin her cousins, Evan sat down beside Rowan. She's right, you know. You did make a difference. Not just in your own life, but in how people think about abuse, about power, about speaking up. I just told the truth. That's more than most people do, especially when the cost is so high. Rowan leaned against him, watching the fireflies begin to emerge as darkness fell. A year ago, she'd been stumbling through snow in a torn wedding dress, choosing death over the life that awaited her. She'd been broken, terrified, convinced she was powerless against Grant's wealth and influence. But she'd been wrong about being powerless. She'd had power all along, the power of her own voice, her own truth, her own courage. It had just taken hitting rock bottom on a frozen mountain road to realize it, and she'd found something else on that road. Evan, with his steady kindness and refusal to look away from someone in need. Mia, with her open heart and fierce acceptance. A whole community of people who'd chosen to believe her, to fight for her, to stand with her against impossible odds. She'd lost so much to Grant's abuse, time, dignity, the person she'd been before he twisted her into something small and scared. But she'd gained something too. Strength she hadn't known she possessed, purpose in helping others find their way out of darkness. And a family, not born of blood or obligation, but chosen, built on trust and respect, and the kind of love that healed instead of destroyed. Months turned into years. Grant's appeals were denied. He remained in prison, his empire dismantled, his reputation destroyed beyond repair. Helix Technologies survived under new leadership, implementing strict policies on workplace safety and harassment. Rowan became one of the leading voices in the domestic violence advocacy community. She spoke at conferences, helped draft legislation strengthening protections for abuse survivors, consulted with other lawyers and organizations on best practices for supporting victims. And every night, she came home to the house Evan had expanded, to Mia's laughter and Evan's steady presence, and a life she'd built from the ashes of her own destruction. 3 years after that night on the mountain pass, Evan asked her to marry him. Not in a cathedral with cameras and celebrities, but in their backyard with Mia as the only witness, fireflies dancing in the August twilight. "I know marriage might be complicated for you after everything," Evan said, holding out a simple silver band. "And if you're not ready, or if you never want to get married again, that's okay. But I wanted you to know that I choose you. Every day, for the rest of our lives, I choose you." Rowan took the ring with shaking hands. She thought about the prenup Grant had made her sign, the cage he'd tried to build around her, the way marriage to him had felt like a prison sentence. This was different. This was Evan asking, not demanding, offering, not taking, giving her the choice instead of taking it away. "Yes," she said, sliding the ring onto her finger. "Yes, I'll marry you." They married in October, a small ceremony at the courthouse with Rachel and Tom as witnesses and Mia as flower girl. No cameras, no crowds, no spectacle. Just two people who'd found each other in the darkness and chosen to walk toward the light together. That evening, as they sat on their porch, the same porch where Rowan had stood so many times over the past 3 years, healing and growing and learning to be whole again, Mia asked if she could call Rowan Mom. "I know you're not my real mom," Mia said carefully, "and I still love my first mom. But you're here, and you take care of me and Dad, and you feel like a mom. So, can I?" Rowan couldn't speak around the lump in her throat. She just nodded and pulled Mia into a hug while Evan wrapped his arms around both of them. Years later, when people asked Rowan how she'd survived what Grant had done to her, she always gave the same answer. "I survived by telling the truth, by accepting help when I needed it, by refusing to stay silent even when silence felt safer, and by believing, even when it seemed impossible, that I deserved better than what I'd been given." But privately, she knew there was more to it than that. She'd survived because a single father couldn't ignore someone in need, even at 2 a.m. on a frozen mountain road. Because a little girl had offered hot chocolate and kindness without judgment. Because a lawyer and a journalist and a community of advocates had believed her when she'd barely believed herself. She'd survived because she'd run barefoot through the snow rather than surrender her freedom. And because on the other side of that desperate flight, she'd found something Grant's money could never buy and his power could never destroy. A home built on love instead of fear, a family chosen instead of forced, and a future that belonged entirely to her. The woman who'd stumbled into Evan Brooks' headlights in a torn wedding dress had been broken and terrified and convinced she was worthless. The woman who sat on the porch 3 years later wearing a simple silver ring and watching her daughter chase fireflies knew better. She was brave, she was strong, she was loved, and she was finally, beautifully, impossibly free.